Hello, hello, one and all, and welcome to SkepTalk. I'm Aaron. Justin,
And
this is our first time together.
I'm excited to be here with your friend.
Very awesome, very awesome. And if this is your first time here on the line, this is our collection of call-in shows tonight with SkepTalk, where uh, maybe you think there's something to this whole science thing. Well, I think so. I'm into that. On the other hand, maybe you're skeptical that the Earth is round, or that evolution is true, or that we all actually somehow just popped out of nothing 6,000 years ago. I've heard somebody claim such a thing. I'm sure nobody is going to call in tonight with those kinds of beliefs, but maybe you do. You should call in and talk to us about them. Spooky stuff. It's the season. Tell us about it. Justin, my understanding is you are interested in some spooky stuff.
I'm actually a big fan of the Spooktacular season. We are in October, and surprisingly, I almost didn't prepare because I thought the rapture was going to happen on the 6th, and then it failed. So I was forced to get my decorations out. So we've already started making our cauldron for Doug and Sharon, and we have a pleasing aroma sacrifice set. So anyone who wants to participate in the Halloween festivities will be game for it.
Very awesome. I have not done my due diligence in decorating, so I have a lot of work to do before the 31st hits. I'm also in the Boston area, so I probably should make a trip up to Salem, but those around here know there's a good time to go to Salem, and then there's October. Because everyone else around the country has the same idea. Go to Salem, Massachusetts for the whole witch stuff, and the place goes from ghost town to so dense you can barely walk forward. It's a rather quiet town every other month of the year except October.
I do enjoy it because there's still a lot of people that get really bent out of shape about Halloween. It's apparent it's the satanic holiday. All forms of evils come out. The amount of nonsense that happens, but then again, it's a lot of fun because you get to kind of witness the sideshow. You can kind of just observe humanity at its finest, freaking out over nonsensical mysteries.
I truly wish we were spending more time worrying about those fake mysteries and spooky things than maybe some of the stuff that's been on the news. So we'll try to stay positive tonight.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. And as a reminder, this is a call-in show, so you can call us in at 1-720-619-2288 or use the web link in the description here. Call in if you have questions related to science, spirituality, this thing called the Bible. Justin and we've gone through the book a little bit. We might know a thing or two.
We've dabbled. Although I can honestly tell you, if you're a Christian, obviously you can stand 10 toes down on the fact that we're just wrong and God is right. And maybe you can educate us today. Maybe you can be the one to teach us the error of our ways. It should be fun, though. Aaron's done a little more than just Sunday morning Bible study, and I've at least read the book, so you could stand a chance. There's technically 4 of you. It's you plus the Trinity against 2. So, Aaron, do
Just
you
trying to
have
think if
any favorite Bible passages?
Oh, I'm trying to remember if it's Titus or Second Timothy, where you have a logical paradox of the Cretan says all Cretans are liars.
Oh, really?
And then Paul says, and this statement is true, which then has the paradox of the person who always lies is telling you a thing. Well, did they say the truth or did they lie? And this creates an infinite loop. And Paul, or I should say Paul in scare quotes, because this is one of the pseudonymous letters, Paul says, oh, this statement is true. And so there is a true logical paradox right there in the New Testament. That one is always a bit fun to point to, but I can't remember off the top of my head if that's
Interesting one.
Timothy or Titus.
That reminds me, there is one that doesn't get enough attention in Romans, where Paul says, let all men be liars and God be proved true. And the funny thing is, if I mean, if that statement's correct, it just means Paul's a liar since he's a man. So the Bible's got quite a few logical issues, but to be fair, he, you know, after he probably wrote that on the paper, he probably realized it was stupid, but he couldn't. It's already there. He already spilled the ink.
Yep. And I just checked. It was Titus chapter 1 is where he says, yeah, this Cretan says they're all liars, and his statement is true. Which, whoops.
Yeah, it says it was one of them, their very own prophet, who said, "Cretans are always liars, vicious brutes, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true." It's interesting that they're called to rebuke the Cretans sharply. I feel like so a lot of people talk about like what is authentically Paul and what is not authentically Paul. And I feel like when you read the pastoral epistles, they just don't feel like Paul to me. Like they're so harsh on women and they're so harsh on other people that when you line them up against what we know is the authentic Paul, I'm like, why did Christians accept this? Like they're so willing to accept forged writings into their fold. Why should we accept any of these things as being authentic when they're so easily duped? Like even the early church didn't believe that James was written by James, but it's still in the canon. It's there.
Yep. Well, we could have had more. There was the apparently legendary creation of 3rd Corinthians, but the person who was literally like found out in the act of faking it. So at least that one, you know, the church was pretty confident. Hey, we got this guy red-handed. Let's not put this in our Bible, though I think it might still be in some canons. I can't remember if it's in the Armenian canon or not. I'm going by memory, and my memory is fading. I need at least 2 more cups of coffee.
I brought one, but unfortunately I can't share it through the screen.
Our Wi-Fi isn't quite that good, yeah.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. Oh, one other fun thing about the Cretans are all liars thing is that a number of scholars think that this was actually in response to the Cretans claiming that they actually had the tomb of Zeus that they could go and visit. So that Zeus was a dude, and here is where he lays as, you know, a dead guy. And other folks is like, you motherfuckers just lie about everything, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the background or the assumed background of where this Cretans are all liars thing is supposed to come from. It's like, yeah, they're even lying that Zeus is dead.
To be fair, listen, if we don't have the body of Zeus, that means he must have resurrected and therefore is a god because we don't have the body. I mean, that's just Christian logic 101.
And technically there is a story of Zeus being defeated by a monster, taken down into a deep dark cave, his legs basically removed, and then he basically became reassembled, came back, and then won victory. So yeah, Zeus was Jesus before Jesus in a way.
I mean, it's
mind you,
impressive.
I'm saying in a way. I am not claiming the same. Yeah.
I mean,
it's almost like Christianity came out of a cultural context.
Yeah, a little bit,
Sorry,
right? I said the only impressive thing Jesus ever did is theoretically burn his image into a cloth after he died, and that's not even true. Self-assembly would have been cool, but he still had all his injury marks after he resurrected, apparently.
Yeah. But he had a few more famous statements than Zeus. I mean, he did famously say, "Blessed are the cheesemakers."
Yes, he did.
All right. So, as a reminder, this is a call-in show. The more people call in, the more fun we get to have, and we give prioritization to theists. So, if you want to show that creationism is true, and this whole evolution thing was made up by the devil, or if you think you can show God by archaeology or logical argumentation, or you just had a really good vivid dream that just proves everything, call in and see if you can, change our minds. Again, number down here below, 720-619-2288. We do have one caller already in the queue, so we can start there if you're happy.
Sure, yeah, let's bring him in.
All right. So let's bring in Noah, pronouns he, him, from Pennsylvania, an atheist who wants to talk to you, Justin, about the book of Hebrews. So, Noah, can you hear us?
Yes.
How you doing, Noah?
Huzzah, you are on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, Justin, a while back, you were talking to somebody on your channel on Deconstruction Zone about Hebrews chapter 6, where it seems to suggest that if you've been a believer and then you fall away, you can't return to the faith. Like, it's not possible.
Yeah, because you'd be crucifying Christ all over again.
Right. So the argument that I've run into from an apologist friend of mine is that, well, they're trying to put the group of people that fell away, not like he's trying to say that they weren't in the group of true believers to begin with. But I mean,
did he tell you?
It says about tasting. Oh, I'm sorry.
So there's a lot of not hermeneutics. There's a lot of apologetics for this passage because people want salvation to be irrevocable, but the reality is Hebrews 6 just contradicts it, verses 4 and 5. So what they'll do is they'll try to dance around it and say, well, this is referring to just a very specific subset of people, which isn't actually in the text. But what subset of people were they suggesting this is referring to?
Well, they were saying that true believers were a different subset from those who have tasted the heavenly gift, right? But I'm like, if you tasted the heavenly gift, then that's like a true, to me, that seems to be talking about like someone that actually tasted the heavenly gift. You know what I mean? Yeah. It doesn't really follow to me.
Well, verse 4 gives you the tip-off, right? It says, for it's impossible to restore again to repentance those who have once been enlightened and has tasted the heavenly gift. So if you were repentant, you did what you needed to do to obtain your salvation. Romans 10, 9 and 10 says, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord and that God raised him from the dead, so on and so forth. If you did that, if you went into repentance, you're saved. Like, unless you just think Paul's wrong, unless you want to include baptism in it, like Jesus famously said, unless you're born of the water and the spirit, you can't enter the kingdom. Like, you could theoretically do that, but Christians aren't going to do that. There's not like any Protestant you're going to run into that thinks that baptism is required. So, but if you read Paul in Romans 10, 9 and 10, he lays down the framework that repentance and a contrite heart is what the Lord is seeking. So if they've done that, if they were repentant, then in fact they fell away, then they fall into Hebrews chapter 6, verses 4 and 5.
Right. So we got into this
fake repentance.
Yeah, well, right. That's exactly. So we got into this long protracted thing about whether or not the passage is or whether the language is past tense or present tense. And my argument was that it was past tense because, like, the rest of the context of it, just other than the crucifying, like they were trying to say the crucifying again part is present tense, like ongoing, and therefore if they stop crucifying him again, then that means that they're no longer considered fallen away.
No, I mean
ask me.
No, I mean so the initial claim about Christ being crucified again means that he died for your sins once, right? He died for your sins once. You were forgiven once, right? So if you fall away, there is no more forgiveness for you. He already gave you the forgiveness. Now, obviously, like if you took away Hebrews, I don't think you'd find that elsewhere in the New Testament. That seems to be a view that is unique to the book of Hebrews. But unfortunately, that's just what it says, and it's what it means.
Yeah.
The having falling away looks like it's in the aorist form, which means it started in the past and is ongoing, meaning the falling away is now continuing. So the falling away doesn't seem to be in question. In fact, we've got a present tense participle for what it means to bring God to shame again. So, I mean, basically what Paul didn't write Hebrews, but people just believe Paul wrote Hebrews. What the author of Hebrews is just saying is that you're crucifying God again, and both crucifying and bringing shame in the sentence are in the participle form, meaning if you come to repentance again, you are doing this a second time. It'd be the same thing in English. If I said, listen,
Right.
If you act up, you're bringing shame on your family. It's just what that means. It's not indicative of like an event happening at a specific time. It's indicative of a particular action just having a particular consequence.
Right. Yeah. See, and that's what I said too. I'm like, it's saying, when it's saying crucifying again, it's like a present participle, but it's just describing the act of falling away. It wouldn't be like an ongoing thing.
Yeah, no, it's not like Christ is like repeatedly and constantly going to be crucified.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, also remember,
that was my whole basis of.
There's multiple passages in the Bible where both Paul and Jesus warn the believers not to fall away, to continue to run the race and not lose your prize. There's an abundant amount of material.
That's what I said.
Yeah, there's an abundant amount of material in the Bible that would indicate that you could, in fact, lose your salvation. And in fact, most of these believers, I assume they're Protestants, are like really crazy about, well, God has to do wicked stuff or else you don't have free will. Well, what kind of a bullshit hermeneutic that free will is so important that God has to harm humanity, but the minute you become a Christian, he takes your free will away? What a weird thing to believe.
I mean,
the idea that God refuses to let you fall away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a silly. If God's so willing to take away your free will once you've confessed and said the prayer and repented, then what a nonsensical claim that you needed that free will in the first place.
Yeah. So that's what I said. Hebrews 6, to me, it just seems like this is Paul warning followers not to fall away and saying, if you fall away, you can't come back again. That to me is what I got out of that. No,
that's definitely what it is. Yeah. I mean, that it's just what it says at face value.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's exactly. So it sounds like we're in agreement on that. So then he wants to go into like, oh, what are the? Because I remember you said something about scholars, like even Christian scholars supporting that claim. So I was just curious if you could cite a few of those for me, just so I can give him a list. Because of course he's not going to take it from me. I'm not a Bible scholar, so.
I mean, I could if you had asked me before the show, but no, I don't have a running list of scholars that agree with me on everything. But I certainly could assemble you a list by going through my collection of commentaries on the Book of Hebrews. I mean, if you send me a message on Discord and remind me, I'll certainly be able to assemble you a list of scholars that are not once saved, always saved. There's a lot of them. To be fair, like you got to remember, this is strictly a Calvinist Reformed issue. And it's only the weird, like the Calvinist people who just think that everyone believes like they do. The bulk of Christianity, 3/4 of all Christians in the world are not once saved, always saved. Your friend is in the minority.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've talked, it's really weird though, because I've talked to Calvinists before about this. And it just seems to me like I've actually never heard the argument that he's using before, but I'm also not a scholar, so I'm sure this has been, hashed out.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I don't want to waste a bunch of your guys' time. I watch your show all the time, so I'm the storm chaser guy that I leave super chats.
Well, I appreciate that.
Next time,
Big W. I know who you're talking about. I know who you are. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yep. Next time you're on, I'll send you a super chat and remind you about that, or maybe I can I don't even have a Discord. Maybe it's time to on one.
Sure. The other thing too is, you could look as well into the early church teachings on this topic if they care about early church teachings. They had a lot to say on this topic, and it won't shock you that they don't really agree with the Calvinists.
Yeah. Okay. So you said early church teachings on Hebrews 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, for example, the earliest in the epistle of Barnabas, he says, "We ought therefore, brethren, be careful to inquire concerning our salvation. Otherwise, the wicked one, having made his entrance by deceit, may hurl us forth from our life." Meaning, I mean, the devil could theoretically do something to cause us to lose our salvation, to lose our life. We've got a bunch of early church quotations that are similar, and it just, it is what it is. I can't see a good reason to hold on to this weird, twisted view of the Book of Hebrews just because, it fits your doctrine.
Right. I mean, because my thing is, if it's once saved, always saved, then what's stopping what's stopping Christians from just going out and committing a heinous act because they get to go to heaven anyway, right? Like they always want to throw that argument. Well, without God, you don't have any morals. You just think you can do whatever, and there's no, no punishment for it. Well, but it's kind of like the inverse of that. If you thinking, once saved, always saved.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
They
There's
will
a lot of
argue,
ways
though,
to look
that
at it.
if you're saved, you won't be that.
You weren't
kind of
really
person.
saved.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's
what
the
Aaron
Calvinists.
said.
Yeah, the Calvinists will save themselves by just saying, well, only the saved will be moral. You just don't think you're moral, therefore you're not saved. So there's always an out. And if you think otherwise, John Calvin will punish you.
Basically.
Yeah, with a pitchfork.
Actually, take them to, I knew there was a verse in Galatians. I was looking for it. There's an interesting verse in Galatians where Paul says, once again, I testified to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obliged to obey the entire law. You who want to be reckoned as righteous by the law have cut yourselves off from Christ. You have fallen away from grace, for through the Spirit, by faith, we eagerly await for the hope of righteousness. So Paul is saying there are some people in the Galatian church that fell away from faith, meaning they had the faith, and that's the defining characteristic of being a Christ follower. And then they fell away from that faith. They fell away from the grace because they chose to embrace the law.
So when it says circumcised, it's talking about a circumcision of the heart, right?
No, of the flesh.
Well, that's talking about the circumcision of the flesh. Okay.
Yeah, Paul is saying that don't get circumcised because you're not required to follow the law. If you do get circumcised, then you are now obliged to follow the law. Christ is of no use to you anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, thank you. I won't take up too much more of your guys'. I'm sure you got a whole list of theists calling in to argue with you, so.
We'll definitely get some.
Yep. Thank you.
It's good to hear from you, Noah.
Yep. You too. All right. Have a nice night.
Thank you for calling.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.
All right, a good start with a fan.
I'm shocked by how staunch Calvinists are in this idea. Like when I was a Christian, there weren't that many doctrines that I was willing to die on that hill for. I was more concerned about, okay, what does the Bible actually say? I'm not so concerned if the Bible makes me change my position. Like you should be open to changing your position if it's wrong.
I've not had too many interactions with Calvinists, but I've never met one that seemed happy. So if you're looking for the love of Jesus, you're probably not finding it there. You didn't find it from Calvin himself because, from what I understand, he was on the nice end, a jerk.
He was burning people at the stake over in Geneva.
Yeah. I tried to be kind, but yeah, you're right. He's like, damn this popistry and their abuse of power. Now time for me to abuse my power.
Basically.
Yeah. Funny enough, you can actually go to the church in Geneva still, and it's actually an archaeological site underneath because it's old Roman ruins under there. So you can actually see that the church that that John Calvin preached at was also built on top of the shrine of some ancient pagan hero. So take that as you will.
That's wild.
All right. Speaking of wild, I think we can go to our next caller is a theist. Let's bring in Tabitha, pronoun she, her, from Texas. She says the earth is flat. So Tabitha, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
How you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay. So a perhaps provocative statement, earth is flat. How do you want to talk about this?
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. However y'all want to talk about it. I do strongly believe the earth is flat. A lot of it pertains to also believing in the Bible as well. especially when it comes to talking about the firmament.
So, would you say that if one were to show that the Earth is spherical, that would disprove the Bible, and you would become an atheist?
Probably, honestly, at this point, I mean, not everything's going so great in my life right now anyway. So, yeah, I would say so.
Sorry to hear that.
Because I would strongly believe, like, one thing or another. So, it's kind of hard to believe in one thing and keep it going straight. You kind of believe in multiple things. But yeah, if one could be disproven wholeheartedly, I probably would not believe in God anymore.
Well, I will note that if you come over to our side, it's not that bad of a place. We got milk and cookies. We can actually be pretty happy even as atheists. But nonetheless, let's talk about the science claim. So, would you
Okay.
agree that the vast majority of scientists would say the Earth is round?
Yeah, I believe that most of them would say that, yeah.
Okay. So, what insight do you have that somehow has been missed by the vast majority of the people who explore the world for their livelihood?
I think that what I refer to the most is probably like when looking at flat maps versus the rounded globe maps, and looking into like flight patterns and things of that nature when it comes to things like that. Um, the flight patterns don't make sense on the globe when you look at it from a globe map, but then when you look at it from a flat map, it makes perfect sense on how
Well,
everything
let's
is
talk about
moving
the
about.
flat map versus globe map when it comes to aircraft. So, can you give an example of what you mean?
So, like, when you're looking at, flight patterns on a flat map, they make sense. Like, if the lines make sense of why we have to go this way or that way to go to certain countries or certain cities. Like for instance, like flying from California to Texas or going overseas to Japan. Like, it just makes more sense on a flat map.
You say it makes sense, but let me test something. When you are talking about a flat map, what map are you referring to? Because flat earthers don't necessarily agree on what the map of the world is. So, what kind of map are you referring to as the flat Earth map?
The ones that they use for flight pattern recognitions, that's the one I've seen online that makes sense to me the most.
Who is they?
What do you mean they?
You said that the map that they use for flight pattern recognition, but
Oh,
by
yeah.
they, do you mean
So
like the
back,
pilots and the flight
like
controllers? Because they don't use a
yes,
flat map.
well, the flat map that they talk about, like when they're learning flight patterns, they say that there's a flat map for it. That's the only one I've seen online. I've only seen one flat map online, and then I've also seen the older maps, maybe those older maps when it shows like the continents all together in one piece land map. That
Well,
too.
that's not a
'Cause
flat. That's not a map showing the Earth is flat. That was a map showing what the Earth looked like tens or hundreds
before,
of millions of years ago.
yeah, yeah. But I don't know. I think the Earth is flat. I do. It just makes the most
So,
sense to me because
well,
I mean,
out of curiosity, Tabitha, how much have you
yeah.
traveled?
I've only traveled within the United States.
Okay. Because I was going to bring up an observation that I have done, and I wanted to see if you might have seen something similar. So, I grew up in the northern Midwest states. I currently live in Massachusetts, but I've also visited as far south as Puerto Rico. And
Okay.
the thing I noticed was when I looked at the moon and the phases of the moon and how things look different just going as far as Puerto Rico. So on nights tonight, Tabitha, if you're watching the phases of the moon, what do you see?
hmm
Like, what do you personally
Well,
see?
just us. I mean, I personally see the moon like pretty good. I would assume, because I mean, I did live in New Hampshire for a couple of years.
Okay.
So I have seen the moon from there, and looks further away almost in a sense, whereas in Texas, because I live in Texas, it looks bigger. So I personally have noticed that the moon looks bigger here in Texas versus up north.
I hear everything's bigger in Texas, but that's another story. But specific to the phases of the moon, you probably, if you watch from night to night, you would watch like the bright side of the moon move from like right side to left side, darkness from right to left. That's generally the sorts of phases you see here in the good old US of A, or at least in the contiguous states of the US of A. I remember, though, when I was astonished going to Puerto Rico, which is further south, and noticing that the moon was going through its phases almost on its side.
Okay.
And if I were to go further south to Australia, then I would actually see it going left to right in the opposite direction. How does that work on a flat map?
Well, honestly, that makes more sense. With the world being around, that would make more sense. But I also think that everything kind of looks different from different parts of the world, regardless of what shape we are.
But some observations are not possible. Let me have another go at this as well. Again, you're in Texas. There are okay. How familiar are you with the various stars in the night sky?
I know about like the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, and the North Star.
Perfect. Excellent. North Star, Polaris. Yes, it's a good star. Not particularly bright, but it does its job. It tells me where generally north is. And since you've been both in New Hampshire and in Texas, maybe you've noticed, you may not have measured it, but maybe you've noticed that actually how high up Polaris is above the ground is different in Texas versus New Hampshire. And further, if you actually were to go south, and I mean south of the equator, you wouldn't be able to see Polaris at all.
Interesting. I've never been that far south, so I wouldn't know.
I'm giving everyone reasons to travel and explore the world. Of course, that's maybe a little bit expensive, but well, like I said, you can travel to Puerto Rico relatively cheaply. I'm trying to think what would be a cheap, and I'm putting cheap in square quotes because what's cheap for one person is their life savings in another. So I need to be careful. But even going north south in the U.S., if you just drive in your car, you're going to notice a pretty significant shift in the angle of the sky of Polaris. And in fact, it follows your latitude pretty much exactly. So if you were to go to the North Pole, not saying that you should hop in your car and go to the North Pole, there's some water you have to drive over to do that. But if you were to do that, Polaris would be directly overhead.
Okay.
And that doesn't happen here in the US at all. If you're further north in Canada, it's higher up in the sky, closer to the high point of the sky. And the closer you get to the equator, the lower and lower it's in the sky. If you're at the equator itself, it's pretty much at ground level. It's never like really above the horizon. And if you go south of the equator, it's not visible at all. And this is extremely expected on the round Earth model. In fact, there's a nice direct correspondence between your line of latitude and the elevation angle of Polaris in the sky. And conversely, if you're too far south, you can't see it at all. Why, on a flat Earth, would you not suddenly be able to see certain stars?
That gives me a good reason to think about that, for sure.
And I want to at least start with observations that you can do. I don't want you having to go and depend on anybody else. I don't want you to, I could, say like, how about the bazillions of photos of Earth from NASA, but just here are the observations you, Tabitha, could do this weekend.
Okay. What would I need to
What do you
look
think
for
about that
in my little sky?
So, all right. Well, like I say, the things you could do is if you're willing to take this much of a road trip, notice how the stars in the sky shift going north to south. That Polaris is higher up in the sky as you go further north and lower in the sky as you go further south. And if you were to go south enough, you wouldn't even be able to see Polaris at all. because, as at least the round earther would say, the Earth itself is in the way. You've now curved away so much that you would have to look through the Earth to see Polaris. So that's one thing you could do. Literally drive enough to see that difference in angle, but to drive enough to measure that difference in angle, you're going to have to drive or fly quite a bit, because I think each line of latitude, like every degree of latitude, is like 30 something miles. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but you're going to be in a car for hours to have probably an appreciable difference in measurement. But it's something you could do. You don't have to depend on anybody else to do this observation.
Okay. So
here's also another fun thing you could do.
Here's my little question for you. My little question would be, so you know how supposedly, like I guess so not everyone can see the North Star, and then that would mean like not everyone can see like Little Dipper, Big Dipper, either, right?
Right. And here in the Northern Hemisphere, here in the U.S., there are constellations we can't see, but folks down in Chile can see quite easily.
Interesting. I'll have to look into that.
It's also true, Tabitha, that we've got a lot of technology that only works on a globe Earth. One example that I don't talk about enough is the Coriolis flow meter. So I'm an electrical engineer by trade, and my industry uses a lot of Coriolis flow meters, and they only work because the Earth is spinning and it creates an inertial force. So when the water flows down, there's enough inertial force to force it to actually begin to rotate as it flows down some sort of a tube. And it's really predictable. We can measure the amplitude, we can measure the rate of spin, we can measure all kinds of stuff, the density of the fluid. And all of this only works because of the Coriolis effect. If the Earth wasn't spinning, none of our Coriolis flow meters would do a dang thing. But when you pumped your lotion or squirted your shampoo out into the bottle, all those things were filled with a machine using a Coriolis meter. Every bottle you have in your house has been filled with a Coriolis meter. All of this brought to you by a spinning globe Earth.
That kind of makes everything kind of sad, though, doesn't it? Because if you believe the Earth is round, and then that brings in the God complex of like not believing God is real, then it's kind of turns into one of those things where, is life really magical, or is it really just kind of sad to like not have something to look forward to? I feel like a lot of people that have issues with being atheist, it comes back to I want to believe that I'll see, my family again when I die and go to heaven and this and that. So sometimes I feel like that's probably most people have issues with it because of the life. If it's just this and it's just now and this is it kind of sucks.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why some people end up in nihilism. But
yeah,
I mean, when it comes to
death, it just makes life kind of sad. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people want to hold on to that.
Yeah, let's just say this much: the reviews on Amazon for Death is 0 out of 5 stars. Clearly, it's not popular, but it also seems to be, part of the reality we're kind of stuck with. I should also note this. I mean, yes, I'm an atheist. Yes, I'm trying to promote people coming to my side of things, but the Earth being round does not prove God does not exist. So I want to make sure that we're not making that kind of leap. So if you think there are other good reasons that God exists, that's something else we would have to discuss. I would not want to make the non sequitur, if the Earth is round, therefore God does not exist. That's a leap that I would not be willing to make, and I want people to leap to my side of theology.
Well, I mean, I think most people would think that because if they believe in like Christianity and they're reading the Bible and they stick with the Bible, it talks about the firmament and it talks about the Earth is flat. Like it literally. I mean, that's
Job 38:14.
So, I mean, without that, it kind of just. I mean, that's how you're going to get a lot of people on your side is by, making that assumption that maybe the Bible is not right. Okay, so maybe God does exist, but at the same time, it would just take a lot of beautiful things away from life in general to make that assumption or to believe that this is it.
Well, I would
This is all we
argue
get.
the beautiful things in life are the things that are real. And even though my time in this universe is finite, and I don't have reason to believe that 50 years from now, this husk of meat is going to do the things it does now, I still find value getting up every day, seeing my wife, talking to my family, my friends, my cat, doing the things I find valuable and trying to bring value into the world. Uh, I find this to be beautiful and wonderful. It's autumn time here in New England. I'm now watching the trees, change colors, and that's beautiful whether or God
Yeah,
exists.
that is beautiful, whether God exists or not. I just think that
Well,
for a lot of people that do believe in God, it goes a little bit further than, just, I mean, we still find beauty in the things that we can see and the things that are real, the things that we can touch. But I think where you start losing people is that, like, one day you're just not going to wake up anymore. You're not going to see anybody anymore. You're just going to cease to exist. And I rather choose to believe that one day I'm going to see my daughter again. One day I'm going to see, family I haven't seen in a long time. And I think that's where people, they choose to believe that God is real because of the small things. Because a lot of people have gone through harsh things, growing up, and you hope that things get better, but they don't sometimes, and sometimes you're just stuck in an endless loop of one thing after another. And I mean, I would say a lot of time, probably in my childhood and most of my like early 20s, that believing in God is the only reason why I'm still alive. Because if
well,
not, I probably would
Christianity
have
could
taken.
be
I probably would have
Christianity.
taken my life if I didn't believe God was real.
Well, we certainly don't want that. But Christianity
Yeah,
could be not true, and there could still be a God. You know that, right?
yeah, I understand that. Totally understand that. But I mean, sometimes I think that people tend to cling to that because that might be the only thing that is keeping them alive at the moment.
Oh, I
I
think
do want
some
to
people
notice,
do, but
Tabitha, this means actually the power is with you again, whether God exists or not, because you're saying your belief, your actions,
Yeah, yeah,
your thoughts is what's giving you that sense of value and that sense of purpose. So
correct.
that means
Right.
you're the one
I had
who's
my own
actually
personal,
structuring that life.
my own personal battle. Yeah, I totally
Well, this is
agree. My
it's not
own
even a
personal
matter of
battle.
battle, but you have to realize that even whether God exists or not, you are still the one saying, "This is what gets me out of bed. This is what becomes meaningful to me. This means, it's still worth pushing forward." And that means that power is with you no matter what. So Tabitha, you're stronger than you think, and you don't need the supernatural to give you that strength.
Oh, I think that I do though sometimes.
There's
I
hard
think that
days,
I do
absolutely.
sometimes. Yeah.
Um,
It's been
just to be a
hard
little bit
lately.
personal,
We'll just say that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I actually lost my aunt just last weekend, and man, oh man, do I miss her, because she was like 90% heart, and the other 10% was laughter. That she was so wonderful and a great part of my life, and now she's gone, and the only thing left are the memories and the legacy that she left. Unfortunately, she lived a good long life, and I feel that's what I can take solace in, and realizing I'm glad she was a part of my life. And even though she'll never be a part of living again, she's still a part of my life. And that will be true until things don't matter for me.
Right. I love it. That is the most beautiful thing about getting to know your family and being close to people in general, regardless of if you're related to them or not. I mean, that is the most beautiful thing about being a person and getting to know other people. Um, I have definitely lost my share of people as well. Um, so, yeah.
What I can tell you, Tabitha, is I know at the beginning stages of the deconstruction, when your brain starts to tell you that the math isn't mathing anymore, and the idea that you're going to live forever and see your loved ones again starts to gradually fade away, because it's not no one flips a switch. It's a gradual process. What I can tell you is that it's hard. Like what you're feeling right now is what I felt. It's what a lot of people felt when they went through it. It's normal. It's perfectly normal. We all went through it. But I can also tell you that it gets better, and that you go through the stages of grief, just like if you lost a loved one, or somebody left you on the curb, you got your heart broken. You go through the stages of grief, and you deal with it. Humans are really resilient. We're really fucking resilient. And I know that
I'm a little too resilient. I'm a little too resilient, honestly, at this point in my life.
I mean, based on what you've said so far, it looks like you're an honest person, which means you're taking in the data and you're going to come to the conclusion that matches the data eventually, right? And so,
more than likely, I mean, honestly, just because I do feel like in our world and our society and everything, that the math hasn't been mathing for a while, and as I've gotten older, things have really just changed for me a lot.
Remember, did you ever have a teenage sweetheart, like your first flame?
No, no, I did not, because I was scared of of falling for anyone, because I got to watch my sister have a baby when I was 14.
Oh yeah.
So
I know that feeling.
I stayed away from anybody and everybody. I waited till way after high school to start doing anything with anybody. So
I always felt that leaving the God concept was a lot like losing your first love. When it first happens, you're like, oh my God, I'll never find somebody else. Like, you're so heartbroken. You're just like, I'll never be happy again, right? But the reality is you'll be fine. We always, you found somebody new eventually, or you moved on. And the God thing does the same thing. It's the same trajectory. But the beginning stages of it, you are sad, and sometimes you're angry. I remember I went through a period there where I was just pissed. I was just mad, because I was like, I would have done everything so much differently if I had known, right? And so, like, but these are healthy stages. Like, you have to you have to express them. You have to have these emotions. But I would also recommend talking to a professional. There are actually counseling professionals and people that do therapy specifically in this space. And I can personally tell you, a good friend of mine in this space, Dr. Joanne Ketch, if you Google her, you'll find her. She specifically works with people recovering in deconstruction and also recovering some substance abuse. That's kind of her two specialties. Good friend of mine.
Okay.
But I highly recommend talking to a professional, because they'll help you to give the tools that you may not have, or they'll give you the space you need to express all of those emotions, so that they don't like come out at work. You know what I mean?
I've had way too much stuff come out at work already. I mean, I've been working the same job for over 10 years. So, I mean, they've seen every side of me. I literally had a seizure at work. And so my coworkers like freaked out while we were at lunch. So, yeah, they've seen me at my worst.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a difficult journey. Yeah.
It is, and I think that's why a lot of people just choose not to do the journey, because they just don't want, like, I mean, it just makes everything hard in general.
They don't,
like, I just
they
feel
don't
like
care enough about the truth.
It's right. They don't care enough about the truth, because you know what? Sometimes the lie is easier to accept than the truth, and sometimes it makes it easier for you to get through the day. And I think that's probably why a lot of people don't want to sit down and don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to accept it. They just want to blatantly just come to the conclusion that you're wrong, I'm right, what I say goes, this is my life, you have no control over me.
Right.
You know? So, yeah. Well, have to give a shout out to my friend who told me to call into you guys. Gage. He lives in Illinois. He's the one who watches y'all on a regular. And he's the one who said, hey, you're my skeptic friend. You should call in and tell them that you believe the earth is flat, because he gives me crap about it too all the time.
Yeah, well, we're glad that you called.
Yeah.
So, yeah, shout out to him, and I hope y'all have a wonderful night.
Thank you,
You
Tabitha.
do the same.
Thanks. Bye.
Good night.
Cheers, friend.
That went surprisingly different than I anticipated in the best way possible.
Yeah, most of the people I know that believe in flat Earth are pretty hell-bent on the idea. They're not really open to change. And to be fair, the Bible is a flat Earth document. There's just no good way around it. It teaches flat Earth.
Oh, yes. It teaches flat Earth, and the people who read it the most vigorously for a long time were flat Earthers until somebody slapped them up the side of the head. So in particular, I
did... Great experiment.
There's that, but in the Jewish rabbinic tradition, in like the Talmud and things like that, all the major rabbis were flat earthers until Maimonides in the 12th century. And basically it's like, hey, I read this guy called Aristotle, and I know this whole science thing, and Earth is round, guys. So while I'm also helping you like reorganize scripture and all the laws and the Talmud and all that, let's clarify our picture of how the world actually is and not look stupid.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of writings in the Talmud about how it is that God's throne is at the top of the firmament, because theoretically, if it's holding back this body of water, how is it that God's throne is there? So they even go through great lengths of saying, well, there's actually an air pocket between the water and the firmament where God resides, and that pocket is caused by like his spirit. And so they go and tell you, well, how big is the air pocket? How many breadths wide and tall is it? And like, because they understood the Bible as being a flat earth with a dome over top of it. And like you said, it wasn't until the medieval period that people were questioning it.
Well, at least in the rabbinic tradition, there were Jewish astronomers who knew the size of the Earth because of the measurements they could do themselves and things like that. It was that the rabbinic tradition was, completely another place intellectually for the longest time. I also remember, actually, it's in the Talmud as well, that there was an argument about where does the sun go at night. And there were two camps. One is that the sun goes on the front face of the firmament, and then at night it goes on the back side of the firmament, so it's being hidden. And the other one was it goes in the front of the firmament, and then it goes underneath the earth, and then pop back out. And apparently that argument won because they pointed out the observation, hey, wells seem to be warmer at night. So that must be because when the sun goes below the earth and is heating all the waters of the deep, it's heating up the wells as well.
Which is, it's a logical point if that's your cosmological view. Enoch said the same thing. In Enoch, he describes windows at the base of the firmament, so the sun can travel around the dome out the window below the earth. And so, like, you can see where someone would have to make that conclusion. My favorite is in Bereshit, where they say the thickness of the earth is equivalent to the thickness of the firmament, meaning they believe the earth was a flat, thin plane, and the firmament was roughly the same thickness of dome, which means like you can't construe that as a globe. There's no way to do it.
Yep. There's and also, just as a bit of fun, apparently the ultimate flat earthers for the longest time were the Chinese. That they actually were producing flat earth maps until the 17th century AD.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, basically they were flat earthers until like the first European missionaries and later colonists came along and basically showing, hey, look how great our astronomy is. We can predict eclipses way better than you. By the way, the Earth is round.
I'm going to have to check out some maps now.
That is what we do. We tell people, go and look at old maps and see if you can find your travel route using medieval Chinese maps, assuming you can even read Chinese.
It's a shame because they were good at many things, apparently just not cosmology.
Oh, yeah. It's a little bit weird. Yeah, I mean, they had excellent engineering. They had astronomy. They had some of the best astronomical records of comets and supernovae for the longest time. And they had their own Eratosthenes. So Eratosthenes was the Greek person who figured out the size of the Earth from sticks and shadows. There was an equivalent writing in China where that person was using shadows and measurements of angles to show how high up the sky was, as in the flat sky above the flat Earth. And as people point out, all of his measurements are these fake round numbers. So apparently it was nothing but a thought experiment. There was no actual experiment. And it was just, I guess, some guy showing off his geometry knowledge.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. But when it comes to our knowledge, I know that we have many more shows here on the line. So this is SkepTalk, and we have a whole bunch of other excellent shows that we can point to coming up this week. So, for example, tomorrow night, we got Chewed Gum with Taylor and Alyssa. On Wednesday, we got The Hang Up with Matt. His co-host is not yet declared, but going to the Hang Up is an excellent choice. TACIS is on Thursday with Ben and Josie. And then come Sunday, we have the Sunday shows, plural. Sunday show at 2 p.m. Central with Matt in Austin, and the late Sunday show at 7 p.m. Central with Forrest and Eric. Then come Monday again, we'll have another SkepTalk. That is at least scheduled with Forrest and Erica, though I've heard that might change, but we got our next SkepTalk next Monday. So if you like this, there's more coming. Don't you worry.
It's going to be Phil Ferguson on with Matt this week.
Oh, excellent. Justin, do you know Phil Ferguson?
I don't.
Well, he has the, as he puts it, cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. It's his podcast, and it's a combination of financial advice and atheism.
I got to check it out.
It's what all the cool kids are listening to.
So it's like Dave Ramsey's without the nonsense.
Yeah. And in particular, Phil has been beating the drum of, guys, there's no reason to be investing in crypto. I'm not going to waste our time getting into rug pulls. Let's be somewhat smart. If you can't understand how this works, don't invest in it, please. Oh, and God doesn't exist. All right.
Well, we got one caller in the queue at least.
Yes, let's go ahead and bring them in. But of course, again, this is a call-in show. We give prioritization to theists. So if you think you can show that God exists, if you think you can bring back flat eartherism, our previous caller, seemed to take our information in stride. Maybe you can tell us why we're wrong about the basics of the stars. Call in, see if you can convince us. It's spooky season. Do you got a good ghost story for us? Let's check it out. But in the meanwhile, we do have a caller lined up. So how about we bring in Miles, pronouns he, him, from South Carolina, wants to talk about how to deal with religious family members, especially when it comes to someone's death. Miles, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How you guys doing?
All right.
Very well. How are you?
Doing good. I was just calling just to see, what your guys' thoughts and suggestions are in dealing with religious family members when someone dies. For example, one of my older cousins has recently died about a month and a half ago. And as far as I know, I'm the only atheist in our family. And so just seeing, everyone grieve made me feel, for them more sorry, as it just seemed like, it's not really, there's very few good deaths. The ones I really consider a good death are for, someone's old or sick and it's coming, versus an unexpected death. And since his death was unexpected, it just seemed that he didn't have a good way to grieve, and that they're just, so stuck on that they will see him again after they die.
Is that a problem for you?
It's just, I hate seeing them like that. And there's not really, something I can really do to help them, because,
Mm-mm.
there's nothing that can really help in this case. But
So how do you
seeing them like
comfort
that,
them,
it's
you
just,
mean?
yeah.
I mean, it's a fair question. I had this conversation with my nephew a little bit. He was saying, outside of Christianity, there's no hope, right? Because if you don't believe in God, or at least the right God, then the end's the end, right? And to be fair, if your family knows that you're an atheist, right, there's really not much you can do to comfort them, right? Just like, a lot of my family, not all my family know I'm an atheist, but a lot of my family know I'm an atheist. And the ones that know that I'm an atheist, they wouldn't attempt to comfort me in the face of death. I think as an atheist, me personally, the best thing we can do is be like the friends of Job. Just get down in the dirt and sit with them and be with them and shut your mouth and listen. Because we don't have anything to offer the bereaved other than our love and companionship. Like, we can't offer them an afterlife, right? But we can be there with them. We can suffer with them. We can grieve with them. And for a lot of people, they say misery loves company, but it's a true saying. When you're down, it helps just to have someone who will be there with you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
honestly,
as
in
for
this
the
world,
afterlife, there's not much you could do there.
yeah.
Eh.
I mean, like how you're saying, like, just be there and just, try and comfort them. That's what I have done, but, it just doesn't always feel like it's enough. I just find it hard seeing them, grieve for something that's not going to happen.
I get it. I also know, like, so for example, a lot of people ask me, how do you talk to your family members about, atheism, or about the fact that their God doesn't exist? And I classically, my opinion has been, you don't have to. Like, your friends and your family, unless they believe something toxic, like unless they believe that you should be harming other people with the religion, like, it's not your responsibility to deconvert them all. If they know your position and they have legitimate questions, they'll eventually talk to you about it. You don't have to go out of your way to deconvert them, right? So, like, I've never, like, talked to my family members about Christianity not being true, despite the fact that I think there's only maybe 2 or 3 of atheists in the family, because it's just not necessary. Your job as a family member and a friend is to be a family member as a friend, right? The people that are questioning, the people that are open to new information, the people that are open to learning new things, you'll eventually get around to having those conversations. It'll come out eventually.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also not sure. I couldn't tell you how many of my family members know that I'm an atheist. I know, like, my parents do, but as for, like, and my sisters maybe, but as for the rest, I'm unsure. So fortunately, they are not Christians who are, like, the crazy, harmful type when it comes to their beliefs, at least.
Yeah. Now, certainly, if you have family members that have harmful beliefs, That's when you go out of your way to deconvert them, right? Hey, let's read the Bible together, friend. I bet you've never seen this verse, right? But like, for example, I can tell you, like, most of my family members are what we would call like nominal Christians. Like, they go to church. Sometimes they only go to church once in a while. They believe the stuff. It gives them a little bit of hope and meaning in the world, but none of them are dogmatic. None of them are going around saying you're going to hell and you're going to hell, or you can't love this person because the Bible says so. Like, we don't have any of that, right? But I would say if you do have that in your friends and family, then that's fair game. If they're hurting people with the religion, then I think it's fair game to approach them and be like, hey, let's have a conversation,
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys.
The reality
that was
is
really all I
we
had.
kind of have to tolerate religion. We live in a religious society.
Yeah.
It's kind of the reverse
unfortunate
of
that we
hate the
must.
sin, love the sinner. It's we may not, appreciate the supernatural beliefs, but boy, oh boy, do we love our friends and family, and that should take priority over our theological opinions.
All right, then. Thank you guys for your advice. I think it was really helpful.
Good luck, friend.
Glad we could help.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
And it doesn't hurt to like, if people are nice and rational and kind with their belief system, it doesn't hurt to let them have it. Actually, I officiated a wedding over the weekend, and I read Bible verses. I led the whole congregation in prayer, the whole thing. And the bride and groom, they knew I wasn't a believer anymore. They didn't care. So it's like it doesn't hurt to let people have it. It's okay. It's just, I want the people that are willing to have the discussion, the people that are willing to be open to new information and willing to read the book. Those are the people that you should be having the discussion with, the ones that are ready. A lot of people aren't ready for it.
Yeah, there's definitely truth to that. That's why they need to call into the show.
We can fix it. We can deconvert you pretty quick.
Yes. Our method might be a little bit slow, one call at a time, but hey, it's these sorts of conversations that slowly but surely can make things a little bit more right. Speaking of right, it looks like our next caller is right and ready to come in. So how about we bring in, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, Sudro. Sudro, he, him from New York, an atheist, wanted to talk about creationism and the paradox of space-time. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, cool. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, Dr. Adair. I follow you too, Justin, just so you don't feel left out.
Appreciate it.
I was calling.
I'm not as smart as the doctor, but I get by.
Well, I think I've heard your stance on this before, but I really have been meaning to talk to a physicist about it, because I have mentioned this to Matt and Forrest at once, and they kind of agreed, but kind of mentioned something else. So, Dr. Adair, my point is, with when people say something is created, creation, as far as I understand it, is an act, and acts require space-time. So when they assert that the universe is created, to me that's logically impossible, because in order for creation to happen, cause and effect, space-time must already be present in order for that causality to even take place. Am I correct about that, or is there something I'm missing?
I would definitely say you capture my intuitions and the intuitions of most people, that if there is an act, if there's any sort of verb applied to something, especially something that's a process, it inherently requires time. To say that I am running, but no time elapses while I'm running is incoherent. If we're saying God created or is creating and doing this outside of time, that is about as coherent as saying what is north of the North Pole. It requires at least as much mental gymnastics as even the claim that atheists believe we came out of nothing. It's like, okay, I guess the converse is you believe that something can exist outside of time but do temporal things. How is that any better? It's at least as gobbledygook as anything else. The major difference, though, is we have physics models that could suggest that time has always existed, that there's never been a first moment of time. That's at least something that some physics models allow for, even under what we know about Big Bang cosmology. So, yeah, your intuition is there. And when I've tried looking at the arguments of people like William Lane Craig to talk about somehow like God's action and time coming to exist were simultaneous, is something, one, I can't understand, and two, is also a problem because simultaneity is one of those things that actually doesn't exist objectively. So, time to blow everyone's minds with our best buddy in the whole wide world, Einstein. We know Einstein basically says there's this relationship between space and time, and that time seems to run slower when you are moving or something's moving relative to you, that you don't agree on how fast time goes by. It gets even weirder than that. In the thought experiment that is usually presented is you have the idea that there's a person on a railroad car, because back in 1905, that was the way to get around. Everything is on a rail. And imagine you have two lightning rods at the ends of your train. If you were sitting right in the middle of the train as it's moving along, and let's assume it's moving really, really, really stupid fast, so it's a significant fraction of the speed of light, a lightning bolt or two lightning bolts come down, and from the point of view of the person sitting on the train, the two bolts hit the two lightning rods at the exact same moment. Looks simultaneous. To an outside observer just sitting stationary relative to the railroad tracks, actually see something different, that they will actually see the lightning strike at two different moments in time. So one person will say the lightning strikes were simultaneous, another person will say they're not at the same time. This can actually get so absurd in what happens is that if you fire a gun, normally what happens is you pull the trigger and the bullet comes out. In certain reference frames, if you are going in the right direction fast enough, you will see the bullet come out of the gun and then the trigger is pulled.
Oh, wow.
So
no, I haven't heard
so
of
the
that.
universe comes along and says, the universe basically says all that stuff about space and time, it's way crazier than you ever thought.
But still, even something like what Lobar Bill would assert, like simultaneous causation, isn't that like saying time was created at the same time as itself?
Yes, he has to go with that, and that requires simultaneity to exist. So for him to do this, he has to go extra special in terms of his interpretation of special relativity, because he knows, as smart as Bill Craig is or thinks he knows he is not going to overturn the gigantic evidence for special and general relativity. So instead, what he's going to do is try to find another philosophical way of interpreting it and say, well, there is an absolute reference of space-time that we can basically add to this whole thing, and it's called the Neo-Lorentzian interpretation of relativity. And that's basically a fancy way of saying, let's assume the metaphysics...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes. That's the other notation for it, is that he follows the A theory of time, where, so in philosophy of time, there's two different major groups. There's A and B theory, goes back to McKinley. I forget the name of the philosopher in the early 20th century who came up with these terrible labels. But the A theory of time says only the present exists. The B theory of time says that past, present, and future all equally exist. And special relativity is only consistent with B theory, not A theory. So for Bill to get his entire argument off the ground, he needs to assume the A theory. So he has to basically introduce this extra layer of metaphysics to special relativity and basically reintroduce the ether, the thing that Einstein threw out. So that way there can be this frame that exists as the objective frame for there to be simultaneity. And as you can imagine, the number of physicists who join him in this mission, you can count on one hand.
Yeah, that sounds pretty pretzel, some mental gymnastics there.
Oh
'Cause I
yes,
think even
it's
Lorenz
a lot of
changed his mind
gymnastics.
on a theory eventually,
Yeah. Now, what he
if
tries
I'm
to
not
do that
mistaken.
the neo-Lorentzians try to do is basically say you can get all the observations of special relativity in their view. There's just this basically extra add-on, and otherwise everything is experimentally the same, with one interesting exception, because this is an interesting trap that Bill Craig left out for himself and then stepped in. So this was about 15 years ago that at CERN, they had an experiment going on there, and the group in Italy was saying, hey, we are detecting neutrinos faster than the speed of light. And everyone's like,
Oh,
well, we know that can't be right. Um, there can't be any sort of particles going faster than the speed of light. That goes against special relativity. We've been checking it for a while. And the group there, I think it was called the Opera experiment out of CERN. And they were like, hey, we know this is crazy. We can't get the result to go away. Please help us figure out what's going on here. Now, when this was in the news at the time, and I think Craig still might have the blog post up about this, and saying, hey, this might actually be consistent with the neo-Lorentzian theory, because on that one, you can actually have particles that go faster than the speed of light. They'll just never like slow down enough to go slower than the speed of light. But these sorts of particles could exist, and so detecting them would actually be more expected on his theory. Now, that means, oh, there's an experimental difference between the two theories. That's not just a bunch of philosophical gobbledygook. We can actually go and do an experiment. Now, eventually, more research was done, and they figured out how they were getting faster than light neutrinos. It's going to sound stupid, but this is actually what the problem was. On their machine that was measuring all the times of the neutrinos coming in, the wire was loose.
Mhm.
Which made it so it was just like a couple microns like further out. And when it comes to the speed of light, this actually matters because light travels 1 foot per billionth of a second. So you got these particles that are already going close to the speed of light. So having your timer off even by a billionth of a second can give you this sort of result. So they ultimately realized that it could be accounted for by that. And when they then basically fixed up the wiring, the result no longer was consistent with faster than light neutrinos. So the joke about these faster than light neutrinos went away, and Craig accidentally showed, oh, his theory actually does differ experimentally from everything else we've done. Like I said, he laid out a trap, and then he stepped right in it.
Yeah, that sounds like him, all right. And as far as I know you earlier you mentioned that time may have always existed, which I tend to lean towards, because I know we can't measure further back than the Planck time, but that doesn't mean time could have necessarily just began then. It's just happening on such a infinitesimally small scale that our mathematics just can't model it.
It's more that our theories of physics don't we can't rely on them anymore at that point. So in particular, talking about space-time, you're talking general relativity, and general relativity is what we call a classical theory. It doesn't account for quantum mechanics at all. And when you are at the smallest possible scales, if you're not accounting for quantum mechanics, you're just doing it wrong. And so the big thing is, hey, we don't actually have a way of integrating general relativity and quantum mechanics at this point. So we can't actually say what would happen then. We have theories that we can't reconcile at this point. And so saying what would happen in that state or before that state is basically to say, we know the math breaks down here, and we're going to keep going with the results anyways. That's like the plane crash, and you're still looking at the altimeter to see if you're flying. No, you're done.
Okay, I got you there. Well, I appreciate it. I didn't know how much time you have left or if you have more colors, so I can go now. But I did have a question for Justin if you do have time. If not, it's no problem.
Actually,
I
we
say
do have
fire the
time.
question away.
Oh, great. Justin, I've heard you talk a lot to a lot of believers about following the Mosaic laws and, people who will be called great or the least in the kingdom of heaven. And one particular person who I've argued with off and on says, well, just because you're called least in the kingdom of heaven doesn't mean you're not getting in there. So it's okay not to follow the Mosaic laws at all, regardless of what is stated in the Bible. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, the question you should ask yourself is, do you want to be least in the kingdom? Because first of all, when we're talking about should you follow the law, we're not talking about whether or not this is a issue of salvation. Like, that's not even the topic. The topic is, would Jesus prefer you to follow the law, right? Does the law still have an effect? And yes, the law it has an effect, because if you don't follow the law, then in fact you're least in the kingdom of heaven. Whereas if you do follow the law, it says you're great in the kingdom of heaven. So the reality is, if you want to do what Jesus told you to do, then you need to follow the law of Moses. He tells his disciples in Matthew 28, when he sends them out on the Great Commission, to teach people all of the commands that he gave them. That includes the commands to follow the commandments. That includes what he told the rich young ruler: if you want to have eternal life, follow the commandments, right? We don't see anything from Jesus that would entail not following the commandments. It's not until after Jesus dies that you get this nonsense about, well, now you don't have to do the commands anymore. And the reality is, this happened because the Jewish people, by and large, did not embrace this movement. It was embraced by Greco-Roman people. And Paul was like, well, they're not Jewish. Why are we forcing them to follow the law? So Paul made up this whole theology, and the book of Acts made up this whole narrative about how you don't have to follow the law anymore, and saying that it was revealed by the Holy Spirit. And to fix this contradiction, the early church just made up nonsensical stuff. Like Origen says that, well, the disciples and Jesus's initial audience weren't ready for this. Okay, so they were ready 20 years later? That's all it took, was 20 years? I don't understand. What do you mean they weren't ready for it? That's a crazy turnaround. What changed in 20 years? And so it's a weird, there's not a good hermeneutic for it, but the reality is, the God of the Old Testament says to follow the law literally forever. And you could make the leap and say, well, listen, he only meant the Jews. He did not talk about the Gentiles. Well, even if you say that, the contradiction still exists, because Paul himself, in 1 Corinthians 9:20, says that remember, he's a Hebrew of Hebrews, he says, even he's not under the law. Well, if Paul, the Hebrew of Hebrews, is no longer under the law, that means the Jews are not under the law. But famously, in Deuteronomy 30, verses 6-8, God talked about this period where he would circumcise the hearts of the people. Think like Ezekiel 36, think Jeremiah 31.
Yeah, that's
the circumcision of the heart.
Circumcision of the heart.
Well, the circumcision of hearts, it's basically it's just a metaphor for how God is going to fix your real problem. Your real problem is that you all have wicked hearts. But he says in Deuteronomy 36, says, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the hearts of your descendants, so that you would love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, in order that you may live. And the Lord your God will put all these curses on your enemies and on the adversaries who took advantage of you. Then you shall again obey the Lord, observing all of his commandments I'm commanding you today. So according to Yahweh, in the final period, when he circumcises the hearts of the people, and then finally they're obedient, finally he dwells with them and he is their God and they are his people, they're still following those laws. So the reality is, Paul is a heretic of heretics.
So hermeneutically, what would be the difference in your view? Like say you're in heaven, or hypothetically, and what's the difference between the people there that are the least and are the great? Is there like some major difference?
Okay, so a little bit. According to the New Testament, you're not given much idea, other than there are some people that are martyrs for the faith, or you've got like the disciples that are going to be ruling and reigning in heaven. So, for example, in Revelation chapter 20, there are people that are going to be alive with Jesus during the 1,000-year reign. These are the people that were like good and obedient people to Christ, or died as martyrs, so on and so forth, in that they're in the first resurrection. Everybody else comes to life to get judged in the second resurrection. So like the part of the reward could be that, you're in the first resurrection during the 1,000-year reign. That could be one of it. The other part of the reward could be that you're part of God's actual body ruling and reigning over the earthly kingdom, the new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem. That's certainly a thing. Now, if you read the Old Testament, this idea of a new Jerusalem, new heaven, new earth comes a little bit from Ezekiel chapter 39 to the end of the book, and a little bit from Isaiah chapter 65 and 66. Traditionally, it seems that the new heaven, new earth from Revelation chapter 21 is pulling from Isaiah 65, where he says, I'm about to create a new heaven and a new earth. This is verse 17. The former things shall not be remembered nor come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I'm creating. For I'm about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. So we get this idea of a new Jerusalem where like all the wrongs are righted, But here's the fun part. This is another contradiction. You can write this down on your list of biblical contradictions. In this new Jerusalem, in the new, the new heaven and new earth and the new Jerusalem, it says, no more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For the one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, and the one who falls short of 100 will be considered a curse. So even in the new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, there are some people that are going to die. They're going to die young. For them, young is 100 years. And if they die earlier than 100 years, it means they were cursed by God, which means there will still be people sinning in the new heaven, new earth, according to Isaiah. The difference is that God's going to smite those people. He's going to get rid of them. That's about it. Revelation 21 says there's no more death, no more sorrow. Okay. Certainly not true. Couldn't be the case.
Okay, I got you. And I know, people can be sinfully wet for sharing, but could people of other carnal persuasions be equally that or something else for Lou Diamond Phillips?
Absolutely. Yep, you can have diamond hands for Lou Diamond Phillip.
Okay. Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Dr. Adair. I really appreciate the chat.
Hey, great to hear from you, Cedro.
Most welcome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Aaron, you may not know about the Doug lore, or
I do not.
Yeah, I didn't explain that to you. So a long time ago, it's been probably a year now. I ran a live stream where I said Jesus is just a pet rock for adults, and I laid out a whole bullet point argument of how everything that Jesus realistically gives you in life, you can get from this rock. And I found a rock in my backyard that looked like it had a nose, and I put googly eyes on it. And the audience named it Doug. And I did a whole live stream comparing Doug to Jesus. I debated like 10 people, and Doug won every debate hands down. And we even prayed. I prayed that Doug would answer prayer, and they prayed that Jesus would answer prayer. And Doug answered the prayers, and Jesus didn't. And it just stuck. And then eventually people were like, well, does Doug have a consort? And I was like, well, let me think about that. And a friend of mine had some petrified wood, and we just got done with an argument on evolution saying that, well, because we don't witness these long periods of evolution for the changes to occur, therefore we can't say that evolution is true. And he goes, how long do you think it takes wood to petrify? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, well, theoretically, that means petrified wood is a miracle too. This shouldn't have happened. It's got to be from Doug. So now we've got a consort, Doug and Sharon Stone. But basically what they do nowadays, they basically just serve as foils for tag pre-sup arguments. Cause it's just so fun to mess with people and let them know that the rock that I put googly eyes on, I can make every argument for that thing being God that you can do for your dumb tag presuppositionalist God. And they don't like that at all.
As a bonus, it also seems like it's a good way if you wanted to recreate some of the scenes from the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Unfortunately, I haven't seen that.
I very strongly recommend.
I'll have to put it on the list. I did have a question. Can you help for people who may, like myself, who's kind of heard of stuff in passing? Can you help me understand retrocausality? Is this like an agreed upon principle, or are people still debating it?
There doesn't seem to be evidence for that, and not to mention, boy oh boy, would that kind of screw up the entirety of science.
Right, that was my thought.
Heard,
I was like, how?
Yeah. Well, when you say you've heard about it, do you know what context you heard it out of?
So I heard it. I was reading a thread a long time ago about somebody just in passing had mentioned that quantum physics could at some point start challenging some of our assumed beliefs about logic and time, and the argument that was brought up was retrocausality. And so I went obviously to the Wikipedia page for retrocausality, and I read through it. I was like, well, if this is true, this would be really unexpected for me thinking logically.
Yeah. I asked because the only experimental example I know of this is a psychology study by, I think it was Daryl Bem. This was like 15-ish years ago, something like that. It was right around 2010. He's a psychologist out of Cornell, so not a nobody, not a goofball. And he publishes this study, which some of his colleagues thought, was this supposed to actually be some sort of like elaborate hoax? Because what it is that he did like several of these collected psychology experiments. And the one I remember in particular was the experiment where there were two groups of students, those who took a test and didn't study, and those who took a test and later studied for that test. So the test is taken, then the studying for the test. And which of those two groups did better on the test? Those who didn't study or those who studied in the future? Which, would kind of suggest that they should be the same. And he was saying that they had found experimental evidence that the students who studied in this future did better. And you wouldn't expect that from random chance. And this, along with some other experiments, were run to try to show that they had, statistical evidence that would pass what most scientists would call statistically significant, and show that this is examples of retrocausation, of future events psychically affecting people into the past. And of course, the response was, "Well, that's nonsense, Daryl. What are you doing? Is this like another like Sokol hoax or things like that?" But it seems like no, he really thought he was showing the proof of psychic powers and retrocausation, and everyone else was saying, "Oh wow, we really need to actually improve the quality of how we do statistics if this is the nonsense we're getting published." And this was in an actual peer-reviewed paper. This was not just like on his blog post. This was like went through the ringers, and other people looked at it and said, "Yes, it passes the basic test of what we call good statistics." And as you can imagine, if you're like saying if our methodology and our publishing allows this nonsense to get through, maybe we need to change how we're actually doing psychology. This was actually also like the thing that kind of broke the dam for what has become known as the reproducibility crisis, especially in psychology, but in the sciences generally, where a study is done, they say they get results that pass some level of statistical tests, and then later, if someone tries to reproduce the results get either significantly weaker or just completely disappear. And there were these big efforts to like reproduce like a whole bunch of major studies, and only about a third of them actually came out about as strong as the original results, which meaning, hey, 2/3 of the results were either much weaker or non-existent. And if you have more than half of your science papers not being actual real effects, holy crap, this is a problem. So how do we fix that? And by the way, other people then finally actually tried to reproduce those results and got negative results. The paper, or the journal that originally published the paper, didn't accept it because they don't do repeat experiments, which is basically like saying, wait, I thought science was about reproducibility. What the hey? But eventually found someone who published the more larger reproduction results. And again, finding no, people studying in the future can't affect their test scores. Because believe me, if I could study right now, I could probably fix my scores back in electromagnetism a whole lot, and I need to. Okay, I didn't have the best grades in grad school. Okay.
Yeah, that happens. Well, grad school is a whole thing. Like, there's a lot happening there, and it's hard. I don't know, for people who haven't been to grad school, just imagine it's like undergrad, but they double the workload, and you're in grad school. It's a good time. We had reading requirements. So in order for us to maintain accreditation, every student was required to read a certain number of pages every semester. That was part of the accreditation requirement. It was pretty wild. And I think it's different depending on what degree you're in, because not every degree is research dependent. Mm-hmm. Ours kind of was. But yeah, I remember spending 3/4 of my time reading and then having to report on reading. It was pretty intense. But if you like reading, you'll have a great time.
Speaking of things that we like, we also would like more callers to come in. The lines are still open. We still have the opportunity to call in. We've had some really good calls tonight. We would love to have some more. Get something off your chest. Try to prove that the Almighty is out there. We have the phone. If the Almighty wants to call him himself, herself, itself, we will find out what the pronouns is of the Master of the Universe when they call in. And if they don't, that obviously proves that God doesn't exist and atheism is right. Theists, you can't let that happen. I'm calling it right now. If theists don't call in the next 10 minutes, we win the argument. We've won the day.
It's possible that we've just defeated Christianity or theism at this point. I remember there was a time where a lot of these debate call-in shows had a queue like 20 people deep, waiting to get in. I remember theists I knew who called in, waited the whole show, and never got to talk to anyone because the wait was that big. But I think there's I don't know. I think there's a lot of people now that are realizing that it's a faith and not a fact, if that makes sense. Certainly there's young pups coming to the faith that have been convinced that it's legitimately true. But I think the older believers are getting to a point where they're ready to accept that, hey, this is just something that I believe. I can't prove it to be true. And that certainly is a healthier place. But I don't know. Like I feel like right now with the rise of Christian nationalism, it's never been a better time to deconvert people.
Oh yes, especially when the nationalism is so Christo-fascist. It's just like, we need to do double duty of pushing back on that, both in terms of the terrible politics and the reprehensible theology that goes into crushing of every sort of minority, religious, racial, gendered, everything. I've yet to see a fascistic or theocratic country that is worth moving to.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I don't know if I know of any. And exactly. The examples we have from the past aren't very good. In fact, I got this is one of my favorite collection of books. This is an English edition of the Librorum Prohibitorum, or in English, this is the bibliography of prohibited books. So the Catholic Church, for some time, for a period of about 400 years, kept a running list of works that had to be confiscated, burned, gotten rid of, and if you were found among them, you could be executed for owning them. And depending on which work it was, they carried different weights of punishment. And there were so many of them, they filled up 3 volumes. And they didn't actually remove this list until the mid 60s. Up until the mid 60s, even though they weren't killing you in the 60s anymore, you could still be excommunicated if you were going to the wrong church and you had books in your household that were on this list. Crazy.
And of course, I believe it had classics on there, like the writings of Hume. And I think even Descartes got onto the list, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, people like Descartes, Voltaire, everybody was on the list. At some point, I even said Steinbeck was on the list. I mean, there's so many people that are on the list that it's hard to keep track of all of them. There is a wiki page dedicated to the list of authors and trying to collect most of the works. But the reality is, if you really want the dirt, you actually have to pony up the dough and buy an online copy of this or buy a hard copy. You can get it online much cheaper. They still kind of sell these online, but I don't think they're in print anymore. But I think you can get like a Kindle edition or a PDF edition pretty cheap. But there are so many works in there. I bet the average person, probably like the average human being, has them on their shelf right now.
And also, to complicate matters, if I remember correctly, there were actually different lists of forbidden books if you were in Italy versus in Spain, that the different Inquisitions had different lists. And I remember I was given a copy to go through, and I think it was the Spanish list of forbidden books, and I was told to flip through and find Copernicus in there. And he wasn't, because that was a banning or at least an editing requirement for the Italian Inquisition, but the Spanish were just like, that's not our priority right now. So it also gets a bit complicated that you might have to buy multiple editions. So what accent do you want your forbidden books to be in?
Right. Yeah, I don't think people realize how vicious the Inquisition was. I'm working on collecting firsthand resources from the Inquisition because I'm going to be putting together a text after I finish my current book. But there are so many firsthand witnesses and edicts that we have from the time period that where people are saying, hey, here's what happened to my brother, right? Here's what happened to my cousin, or I myself. I said something to the wrong person and they took it the wrong way and they drugged me before the Inquisition and tortured me for a week before they let me go. Just because the fear of getting tortured yourself was so high if you didn't turn somebody in. Because during the Inquisition, a lot of the problem wasn't just that you could be in trouble. It's that if you didn't report somebody that you knew of, you would be guilty as an accomplice, right? So, for example, one of the big murders was the murder of all the Waldensians. They were an early Anabaptist group. And it was said of them, if you know where they're at and you don't report them, we will confiscate your house and execute you as well. And this was how the Inquisition worked. This is how the time period was. It was brutal. And so when we think of this idea of like, yeah, we need Christian nationalism. No, we had Christian nationalism once. We didn't like it. We don't have to go back to that.
Yeah. It's amazing how much people are willing to forget or lie about the past to make it seem more glorious and something to go back to. The 30 Years' War was not a happy time for Europe. The name kind of gives it away.
No. Yeah. I think we got some calls
while
in.
we were exactly, yeah, we have 2 callers that are now in the queue. Do you have a preference for either one? Because they're both waiting about the same amount of time.
Yeah, I guess we'll pull up Jay first then. I think he got it here first.
By a smidgen, yes. So how about, Jay, pronouns he, him, from Indiana, wants to talk to Justin about some Old Testament history. Well, Justin, hopefully you've read that Old Testament.
I think I peeked at it before. How you doing, Jay?
All right.
Hey, doing really well, guys. It's really good to talk to both of you. A huge fan. I'm actually a deconstructing ex-pastor, and you guys have both been huge on my journey, so thank you for that.
Well, congrats.
I recently, yeah, thank you. Recently, I've been tuned in. I know it was one of your shows, specifically, Justin, and you were going through and talking with somebody about Old Testament prophecies. And the argument, of course, being made from their side was, well, these are about Jesus. These are directly referring to Jesus. And of course, it was just verse after verse. No, I mean, this is not at all about Jesus. You're not going to find that. You're not going to find how it links. And I guess my question is, because I had once heard a Christian pastor come from the viewpoint of, at one point, this group of passages, say in Isaiah or Ezekiel, was looked at as messianic, and from their opinion, it had changed to become more about Israel, the nation. From listening to your commentary, I kind of got the impression that this was always referring to Israel. What's your take on that? Was there a change at some point on the timeline and how it was interpreted, in the grand scheme of things, or was Israel pretty much always writing for Israel?
So we can't tell you exactly what they believed at the time of writing, but we do have some hints. So for example, we don't find an individualistic interpretation until the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've got some Dead Sea Scrolls that seem to interpret the one of the teachers of righteousness as being tormented. He's got kind of an enemy, perhaps inside of the community even, and they liken his suffering to the suffering of Isaiah 53. We've got an early interpretation in the Talmud that suggests that any individual, even Moses, who the Lord rebukes, is a fulfillment of Isaiah 53. But the reality is, most of what we would consider, if we just took it at its face value of what would people have read it like at the time it was delivered. At the time it was delivered, there couldn't be any doubt that people would have taken it as a prophecy for corporate Israel, because every prophecy in Isaiah 40 to chapter 55, that's Deutero-Isaiah. You're a pastor, you already know what Deutero and Trito Isaiah is. Every prophecy in that is about the Babylonian exile. There's no good reason contextually to go into Deutero-Isaiah and find any prophecy in there that's not about the Babylonian exile. And you've probably heard my spiel on Isaiah 53 before. So you probably already heard me read the 8 different times where God tells you that the nation of Israel is the servant. But there's also one that we don't get to talk about very often. Have you read the Psalms of Solomon? Not the Song of Solomon, but the Psalms of Solomon. They're extra biblical texts that most likely were written during the Dead Sea period, maybe the 2nd or the 1st century BCE.
Okay. Yeah, I've run across the name. I don't think I've been through that set, but I know what you're referring to. There's
an interesting line in the 17th Psalm in verses 21 and 22. They refer to it, Israel, as the Lord's servant, girding him with strength and shattering unrighteous rulers. And it really sounds a lot like how God talks about his servant Israel in Deutero-Isaiah. And so this is kind of an early parallel in the Psalms of Solomon that's paralleling what Isaiah is saying. It seems like whoever wrote this had a corporate identity. You can also read in the disputation between Origen and Celsus. In that disputation, the supposed Jew of Celsus, as Origen calls him, lays out an argument that the Jewish people understand that the individual, or the passage is not about an individual, but about corporate Israel. So you can definitely find in the disputation of Celsus, he titles it Against Celsus. You'll find in that disputation a section where it just flatly tells you this is what we believe. And Origen, it was late 2nd century, right? Certainly, I've got the quote here. It's in book 1, chapter 55 in Against Celsus. He says, "Now I remember on one occasion at a disputation held with certain Jews who were reckoned wise men, I quoted these prophecies, to which my Jewish opponent replied that these predictions bore reference to the whole people regarded as one individual and as being in a state of dispersion and suffering, in order that many proselytes might be gained on account of the dispersion of the Jews among the numerous heathen nations." So this was, at the time of origin, this was a pretty widely held Jewish belief. And it seems like that was a little bit of the case during the Hasmonean period, during the Hasmonean Empire. They seem to have this idea that the promises from Isaiah and the promises even from Daniel were starting to come true. They thought that finally their suffering had been finished. Like they suffered enough that now God's promises are coming true. So we find even in Second Maccabees, in the opening of Second Maccabees, there's a line that says that God's promises are coming true and the rest of them are about to be fulfilled. And then we find, like, in the coinage, if you look at the coinage of Alexander Jannaeus, they've got a really interesting star on Alexander Jannaeus's coins representing the prophecy from the book of Numbers about a star rising, a messianic figure. And there are certainly a number of people during the Hasmonean period that were of the opinion that these prophecies from the Old Testament are finally starting to come true. They were about us. And it wasn't until the Romans came in and kind of kicked their asses that they're like, oops, we thought God's promises were all coming true. Now we have to reinterpret all of these passages. We have to, because they can't fail. We can't say that they failed. We have to go in and reinterpret them. And if we go in and reinterpret them,
I'm sorry.
I say the only way to reinterpret them is to say words don't mean words.
Yeah. So really, it's backwards. It's the messianic thing that's going to be revisionist when you look at it, as far as an individual.
Yeah, because the fever of Messiahism in the first century CE was at a high level. So they're looking at the Old Testament and they're finding anything they can that feels messianic, and then they're applying it. That's why there were so many false messiahs. There's a lot of false messiahs that came before and after Jesus, even a lot of them from Galilee. We think of people like Dositheus. We think of other people like Judas. There was a guy named Judas who was from Galilee. So, like, I don't know, people were just looking for anything they could, and at that point, they had given up on the context. They already said, listen, these prophecies, since they couldn't fail, we just ignore the context now and we reapply them. So if you read in the Dead Sea Scrolls, like the Habakkuk Pesher or like the Isaiah Pesher, they go in and they just tell you, well, this means something new now. Like, so in Habakkuk, it talks about what the Chaldeans are going to do. Those are the Babylonians. Well, they go in and they say, well, this is what Habakkuk says, but actually the Chaldeans are actually now the Kittim. They're a whole different people group. They just go in and they say, obviously, we're just going to reinterpret these things. And it seems that all the New Testament authors, they understood the prophecies of the Old Testament not to be fulfilled in the original context of the prophecy, but to be fulfilled in a secondary sense. I don't think there's a single prophecy that's mentioned in the New Testament where the author understood them to be fulfilled in the primary context in which it was given. Not even the fulfillment of Daniel 9, when Jesus says, when you see the armies surrounding the city, and people are like, oh, well, Daniel 9, the temple's going to get destroyed, all this. Well, even there's an interesting line in there where Jesus says, when you see this happening, run to the hills. Well, that's a quotation from Maccabees chapter 2 or 3, when Judas Maccabeus revolts against the Greeks who have taken over the temple. And he says, all who are zealous for the law, come to the hills, come to the mountains with me. And then they all retreat to the mountains and they engage in guerrilla warfare. And even Josephus states that the fulfillment of Daniel 9, this is Josephus Antiquities Book 10, he says that this was fulfilled during the Antiochian crisis. And it seems like Jesus understood that as well. He thought it was going to come true a second time, which is why he says when this happens, head to the hills, because he already knows the story. He already knows. We already saw it play out once. We saw how successful it was the first time. It's going to happen a second time. So even Jesus seems to have a hermeneutic where he's fulfilling prophecy, but he's fulfilling prophecy by completely decontextualizing the words of the prophet.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I knew you'd be able to fill in those gaps for me. I really appreciate it. And it sounds like I need to spend some more time in some of that, some of those other, the apocryphal books and all of those things. I wanted to ask too, just real briefly, and then I don't want to take up any more of your time. Would any of this have anything to do with, would you say that Jesus was a student of the Septuagint? Is that true?
I've had some negative feedback. The Jesus of the New Testament, that person depicted in the New Testament could not read Hebrew. He quotes from the Greek Septuagint, even in Luke 4, when he quotes from Isaiah 61. He's quoting
in the temple
from the Greek Septuagint.
Okay. That's what I was trying to figure out, was where is this coming from? Is this Hebrew? Is this okay?
Yeah, it's not Hebrew. You won't find the New Testament authors quoting from the Hebrew text. There's a couple occasions like they'll quote like a small snippet. They'll quote like Hosea 11 verse 1, out of Egypt I called my son. But in reality, that reads the same in the Greek and the Hebrew. There's really not much of a difference there, and it's so short, we all know it. But whenever you read quotations in the New Testament of the Old Testament, like 99% of the time, they're from the Greek Septuagint. And if anybody in the New Testament could read Hebrew, they just decided they didn't need to, because they don't quote from it. But the reality is, if they could quote from it, a lot of things would be different. For example, in Galatians, Paul lays out an argument in chapter 3 about how the promise of Abraham, the offspring of Abraham, actually meant Jesus, because offspring is in the singular, not in the plural. The problem is that only works in Greek, because sperma in Greek can be singular or plural, but in biblical Hebrew, you don't have that. Zerah, seed for offsprings, is a collective noun. It's like saying sheep in English, right? We understand that sheep could be the entire flock. And we don't really have instances typically where there's a singular usage of that word. So Paul, if he could read Hebrew, was too lazy to know it very well. And here's my impression. I learned Hebrew in school. I did the whole thing. I learned Greek in school. I can't say that I've mastered either of the languages, but I know the grammar. And the first time I read Galatians 3, it's been a long time since the first time I read it after knowing Hebrew. The first time I read it, I say, oh, this motherfucker doesn't know Hebrew. Because one of the most common words you'll find in the Hebrew Bible is the word for offspring. It's used so many times. Like when you learn Hebrew words, it's like the first 50 words you're going to learn, you're going to find the word for seed. It's just going to be there, right? So the fact that he didn't know this is crazy. And he calls himself a Hebrew of Hebrews. There's no way.
Yeah. So it sounds like a huge piece of maybe understanding what's really going on is having that piece of Greek there in your thinking, or understanding that they were interpreting everything through the Septuagint. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's how Matthew ended up on virgin in chapter 1 when he talks about the virgin birth. You could only get that if you were reading in Greek. And the funny part is, even in the Greek, it doesn't necessarily mean virgin. So at the time that Isaiah would have been translated into Greek, it was still okay to use Parthenos to refer to somebody who was or wasn't married, or was or wasn't with or without child. So Dinah, in the Greek Septuagint, Genesis 34, Dinah is referred to as a Parthenos, even though she's already been assaulted by Shechem. In the writings of Homer, we've got instances where married women are referred to as Parthenos. So at the time Isaiah was written, it wasn't strictly true that a Parthenos always meant they were chaste. But the reality was, by the time of Matthew, just like language evolves over time, by the time of Matthew, it was a little more strict.
Yeah.
And it was typically more often used of somebody who was a virgin. So Matthew took it and ran with it, not realizing the history of the term, and just said, oh, well, this must be a miraculous birth. So not only did the guy not know Hebrew, he also didn't really know Greek all that well. And to be honest, I wasn't even good at Greek. I didn't even like it, but I knew enough to know that this guy was completely out of bounds.
Yeah. Wow. These little pieces, and I feel like you're filling in the gaps. I just feel like it changes everything. And, I mean, a lot of this or some of this I have an idea of or a hint about, but I guess coming away from it, not having that, Protestant perspective or take on everything just really changes things. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Good to hear from you.
Hey, thank you guys so much, very much. I won't take up any more of your time. I know you said you had more calls, but thank you so much for working me in and answering those questions. That's been great. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Cheers, friend. Good luck on your journey, man.
Hey, thank you. Thank you to both of you. Have a good night.
Good night.
I can't tell you how many messages I've got from people in the ministry that are deconstructing or deconstructed. Some that I personally know from school that have been like, dude, like, I saw you and like I've been thinking the same thing for a long time, but no one's saying it. The reality is there's a lot of people who went through higher education on the Bible that have been thinking this for a long time, but they haven't been able to pull the trigger and be open with it.
I've heard stories much like that from the Clergy Project, where they somewhat jokingly say, by the time you're done with seminary, you don't believe in God anymore.
There was a old saying that the seminary is called a cemetery for a reason. It's where Christians go to die. And it's true. A lot of people drop out in Bible college and seminary. We kind of had one or two professors in Bible college that we knew to call on when people fell away, because it was such a common practice. It was because like people learned things that they weren't told in church. Like you learn that Jeremiah was being edited and changed hundreds of years after he lived, and you're like, what? So people were just willy-nilly moving shit around and adding to it. And you're like, oh yeah, pretty much. People don't like that.
Oh yeah. And the funny thing is that in those classes, usually the professor up there isn't trying to say, all right, I'm going to now deconvert all of you. I'm going to, bring fire and brimstone on your beliefs. They're trying to, like ease it in as much as possible, but still you come in with thinking, this perfect text. And then you find out, by the way, the actual text is our best guess at a reconstruction. And there's a few things we don't know. And maybe there were at least three different authors for Isaiah. And it's like, oh. Yeah.
And finding the Dead Sea Scrolls was huge because there was a theory for a long time that Isaiah had three authors. And then when we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, we discovered that we had manuscripts of just second Isaiah and manuscripts of just third Isaiah and first Isaiah. So it became clear that this was a three-part composition once we were able to collect further evidence. The fact that they smushed them together in the one book and tried to sell it as one author is just a testament to how dishonest the movement has always been.
It also reminds me of one of the things that relates to the interpretive tradition. I was going through Justin Martyr recently, and he was talking about, one, you got to go by the Greek and not the Hebrew of the Old Testament because the Jews changed it, which, how many anti-Semitic dog whistles are going off there. But also, he says, even when you're reading the Greek, sometimes the Holy Spirit will give you words that say things were done with the past tense, but it's actually going to be in the future. So even though the text says this, we're going to say it says the opposite. You just have to have the Holy Spirit tell you when the Holy Spirit is lying to you.
Yeah. If you could read like one church father as a Christian, I would recommend reading Justin Martyr. He gives so many bad arguments for the faith that it's amazing that he has a reputation that he has. I read him a long time ago when I was in high school, only because we had the same first name and we had to read something from the church fathers. I went to a Catholic school. It was part of our curriculum. I said, I'll read Justin Martyr. And I was thoroughly unimpressed.
Oh, yes, yes. And yet somehow he's Justin Martyr, but he's also known as Justin the Philosopher. And it's like, this was your best philosopher in the 2nd century? Guys, that's like starting the race and tripping over the start line.
I know. Yeah. Origen actually seems to be competent with philosophy, but he doesn't seem to engage in it as much as others. But he seems to be really competent. He knows the literature.
Yeah, like I say, I've been exploring Justin's stuff, and especially because he was trained as a Platonist for a long time, and he carries those things through, and it looks like among the things he carries through is the noble lie. So yes, it is okay to lie for the greater good, and you better believe everything I tell you, even though it's not true, just so I can get you in the door.
Right, yeah.
It's like, yep, absolute best of the best there. All right. Speaking of best of the best, we have 2 more callers. Both of them are atheists, and both of them I think are worth talking to. So I guess we'll just go in the order of who's been waiting the longest.
Sure, yeah.
So how about we bring in Godwin, pronouns he, him, from Massachusetts. Is Godwin going to tell us about his law? Well, no, he says he's going to talk about an analogy for evolution. So Godwin, can you hear us?
Hey, Dr. Adair. Hey, Justin. How are you guys doing?
Good. How you doing, friend?
I can hear you. I'm doing good, buddy. I'm a little tired. I hope I don't call you guys the wrong names, like call Justin Doug or something.
It happens a lot, actually. I'm okay with it. Don't worry.
It does. I know. Before I get on to the analogy, I heard you guys talking about Christian nationalism. I love when there is an atheist caller and they bring something to the table. I usually never call these shows unless I have something to add, and I hope I can keep up because, the last guy had something great to bring up. But there's a person named Christy Burke who has a website, Jezebel Vibes on YouTube, and she does as a series about Christian nationalism and Project 2025. In case anyone wants to check it out, she's on fire against it. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Yeah, she's great.
No, I know Christy Burke really well. That's how I got on TikTok. Like, she was my introduction to TikTok. I thought TikTok was just like kids dancing on the internet, and then I started a YouTube account like shortly after Christy started her YouTube account, and hers was growing like wildfire out of the gate. I'm like, how is she growing so fast? She just started her account. And then I read the comments and they're like, oh, we came from TikTok. I'm like, oh, she's got a following on TikTok. Then I went to TikTok. I'm like, oh yeah, she got a huge following on TikTok. And I was like, I got to get on TikTok, it looks like.
Yeah, TikTok's like a wonderful hornet's nest or breeding ground for this, for what you guys do.
Yeah. Really is.
So I wanted to pass this by someone, some people who are science minded. And so I've watched a lot of these shows, and I find that theists never understand how evolution can be both random and still procure certain results. So I'd like to get your feedback, possibly input. Maybe you could rework this analogy for me. So I came up with a lottery analogy to explain how evolution is not exactly random. So run the same lottery ball game for 150 years without replacing the balls. The environment acts upon the balls, affecting their condition. This change over time affects the outcome. So this roughly is analogous to the environment, affecting population extinction, which directly impacts the existing population. What do you guys think?
I mean, it's true. It's like anything that you do for a long time is going to end up with some sort of a bias. Like if you roll one die for a long period of time, eventually it's going to wear in such that it favors one side over another, I
just think it's simple for people who just need a simple explanation they can relate to. A lot of people play lottery ball games,
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember Richard Dawkins also had a, I think, helpful analogy as well of a lock, or like a key lock system. So there are 6 numbers that you need to be able to pull the key out. Like each rotor on there is holds one of the teeth of the key, and you need all 6 of them to be in the right configuration to pull it out. So if you don't get them all right, the key is stuck, you get nothing. But evolution is more like if you can get one of the rotors out, the key can move back a little bit. So you can actually make some progress. And it's those little things that just, makes it so you're just slightly more likely to succeed the next time around. That adds up until, in this analogy, you've pulled the key out of the lock, one tumbler at a time rather than having to get all the tumblers correct at once.
Right. Yeah, I see how my analogy doesn't really get you to the eyeball, unfortunately, and that's what they're looking for. No pun intended.
That was good.
Yeah, I see that. That's I'm gonna check that out, Aaron. Thank you. That I think I may have heard of that, but yeah, getting to a result. I guess sometimes people put value on certain things, like the royal straight flush, when really it has just as much chance as any other hand you randomly pull out of a deck of 52 cards. So, I can't really bring it full circle to the whole, you've got the winning lottery numbers, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there, see what you thought. But I'm going to check out that key and lock analogy, and I just hear them not understanding how I guess it's the physical environment acting upon things, and I hear a lot of people use it, and I used to use this analogy, the snowflake, it just goes to show atoms form bond to each other a certain way, period. And that
Actually, now that you're talking about games of chance, I just realized a different card game that might even be a stronger analogy: Texas Hold'em, or poker generally. As the saying goes, know when to fold them, know when to hold them. The card you get is random, but there is the selection factor of knowing which card you're going to hold and how it increases or decreases your chances of ultimately winning that hand. And people who know how to hold them, knows that bit of probability, knows to select them, and will win more hands, even though the cards they are actually getting are random. They don't know the next card is going to be a 2 of clubs, but they know how to play the numbers in that sort of way. So knowing probability, but having some level of selection, that's fundamentally what evolution is. If you can win a game of Texas Hold'em, you can build an eyeball. Obviously not a perfect analogy, but there's an analogy there.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, well, hail Doug. See you guys.
Praise Doug.
Hail Doug.
Simply wet for sharing. Good to hear from you, Godwin.
Yeah, good to talk to you guys. Take care.
Good night.
I think too there's something to the idea that, not all evolution is unguided. Like, we have to select for mates, which seems to be, as far as we can tell, like a guided process. Like, we have selection criteria, and then because we have selection criteria, that means we're going to produce offspring of a particular type. So, I mean, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of randomness in evolution. Obviously, mutations occur at random, but there's a little bit of decision making happening there somewhere.
To some degree, I mean, that's where like sexual selection comes in. And if Forrest and Erica were here, I'm pretty sure they could give 80 examples. But yeah, there's natural selection, but that's only one of the many kinds of selection out there. Natural selection is just the one that Charlie came up with and has advanced the field so much because of it.
Well, it looks like we're down to Yoshi from Texas.
I don't know
Yoshi
what happened,
wants to
but
talk
I think
to.
that it just closed itself. So I think that Yoshi
Actually,
got
I
dropped.
think I hit I actually hit a button that was bad. I dropped the host room, so that was me.
It was you. Oh, I can't bring him back either.
Oh shoot!
He gone.
I apologize. That was me. I thought it's like, well, I'm just trying to end the call, but I hit the not the drop the caller button, but drop the show button. I apologize.
How dare. I'm so upset.
Aaron has had enough.
I'm sorry.
Well, time for super
Self-destruct.
chats, I guess.
Yeah, let's do it.
But just very quickly, let me just apologize to Yoshi. I'm sorry we didn't get to your call. Obviously, I'm the most terrible host, but I'm not going to be here for the rest of the month, so I won't be able to screw up any more of the shows on the line for the rest of October. So the rest of October is good to call. I apologize again, Yoshi.
Aaron, you are a valued and loved member of this community.
And I'm fired.
That's a hard way to hear anything, whether you're getting fired or getting broken up with. I love you, but you know something after that but's coming. It's not going to be good.
Yes.
We got
here at this company, we're a family,
from Lanto.
And you're divorced.
Yeah, exactly. We were family. I guess we could just alternate on the super chats. Lanto, thank you for the super chat. It says rock hard for Doug, Justin, and Aaron. We're rock hard for you, Lanto.
I'm double hard because of the double N. And we got 666 from Ruwardia. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but we're going to live with it. Ridriar, Doug is God, but is Sharon a goddess, a prophet, an angel, or is she just stoned?
She's stoned and she's a goddess. She's the co-redemptrix of reality, friend. And Forum Galorum, great to see you tonight. Thank you for the super chat. It says, happy Crapture Day, revised. Yeah, the 6th. We've only got a couple hours left before the next Rapture prediction fails. The modern day Millerites are on their rooftops anxiously awaiting jazz trumpet angels while the rest of us watch Justin and the line. Best jazz combo ever. Actually, that's a fair point. There's actually probably quite a few Christians out tonight that are waiting for the rapture to happen.
5 pounds from Barbara Barrett. Justin, what are those characters on your wall chart?
Oh, that's a good question. So you're probably only able to see the bottom 2 letters. Well, technically 3. You got the scene and the sheen, and then also the top. And so I've got a chart that I built some time ago that's got the progression of alphabetic script from the Northern Levant. So it's got Phoenician, it's got Proto-Sinaitic, it's got the Proto or the Paleo Hebrew, and then it's got a Hebrew text, and I even got some hieroglyphic text in there. So it just shows the progression over time period of how the alphabet changed all the way up to what we would call the Hebrew script, which technically it's actually an Aramaic script that we placed on top of the Hebrew alphabet. Good question, though.
Yeah, I thought it was just Hebrew, but apparently you've got a collection of writing systems.
Well, it's actually really helpful. I'm taking modern Hebrew now because I did biblical Hebrew when I was in school, but after that, I'm gonna do Paleo Hebrew, and I need to memorize, like etch into my head the Paleo Hebrew alphabet. So because I want to really go through the Samaritan Pentateuch, and the Samaritan Pentateuch is written in Paleo Hebrew, and it'd be easier if I had everything memorized properly. The grammar and everything is still roughly the same. I just have to get the right alphabet memorized. Storm Chaser, good to hear from you again. Thank you, Big Time Noah says thanks again for the input. Praise Doug, and yes, rock hard for Doug, friend.
$10 from Heather Rochi. A group of flurfs and globers went to Antarctica December 2024, the final experiment. Lots of tests, lots of 24-hour sun. Jeranism left the movement. Yes, for those of you who may not have heard about this because you were living under Doug the Rock, this excellent and straightforward experiment or observation was done because on the map that most flat earthers have, basically would not allow for the possibility of going to Antarctica in the Antarctic summer and the sun stay up all day. You already have it in the northern hemisphere. If you go up to like really far north Canada, Siberia, etc., the sun will stay up all day. There will be days where the sun never sets. But they argued because of the setup of their map, the sun can't do the same thing in the southern hemisphere, so you'll never have a 24-hour sun in Antarctica. And then, of course, the thing is, well, we can go and see that. So what did they do? They got a bunch of flat earthers and globe earthers to go to Antarctica, go to a base there, and basically see what the sun did. And lo and behold, the people who know what the Earth does are right. And Jaron of Jaronism is the most famous person to have gone down there as a flat earther, left, and then deconverted, if that's the best term for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cyber Deconstruction, great to see you, my friend. Thank you for the super chat. Says, hey, all. Here to see some cooking. Cyber, we actually didn't get a lot of opposition tonight. I guess they either got raptured or we scared them all away. But we're glad that you're here. Thank you for supporting the show, buddy.
And $9.99 from Becky004. I'm completely understand how Tabitha feels. It's so hard thinking about not being alive anymore and never seeing the loved ones you have died, especially when you've been fed this hope your whole life. I completely agree. My sympathy is through the roof. And yeah, it makes, strangely enough, I find wishing and hoping and thinking there's life after death steals our life and makes death actually harder to accept.
Yeah. It's a frustrating thing. And I think people think that believers don't have to deal with it, but they do. I've got a friend who works in a cancer ward, and she sees people die every day. I just asked her one day, I said, do the believers have a different passing than the non-believers? Are they more at peace, or like how do they go? He goes, no, they're all the same. Everyone's terrified. Like no one goes into death peacefully.
Yeah.
And from Ash Glitch, thank you for the $10 super chat, says, so sorry for your losses, Tabitha. Sounds like you've had a rough life. Atheism just makes every moment we spend on this world all the more precious and meaningful. Keep fighting. We're here for you. I couldn't agree more, Ash. I think knowing that we have a finite amount of time causes us to spend it more wisely. I think of like Seneca. Seneca says he wrote a small treatise called the brevity of life, or the shortness of life, or whichever title you want to give it in English. And he says it talks about how it's so short, but he says, but it's not necessarily that it's that short, it's that we waste so dang much of it. And so I think getting into atheism recenters your mind to stop wasting the time that you have. Make the most of this time. Love all of your friends and family. Don't forget to hug and tell your friends that you love them. It might, you're not guaranteed that they'll be able to hear it again or that you'll be able to do it again. We don't know when the proverbial beer truck could take us out. So if you want to do something, do it. You want to join the team, try out for it. You want to ask the girl out, ask the fucking girl out. Just go live your life. That's my speech. Thanks for coming to my tech talk.
We will have many more, don't you worry. £5 from Mystic Minds Analysis Tavern. I lost one of my pet Degus recently. It broke my heart, but it reaffirmed my commitment to enriching the lives of animals wherever I can. Exactly right. We gotta do what we can with this life and make it as enriching as possible, because it's the only thing we can do.
Yeah. And 5 from Krenich says, great hosting duo, Justin. I have your mug. Happy Halloween, all. Well, I love this mug, by the way. And I don't know if you guys know this. I do really like holidays. I even I do Christmas sweaters all Christmas. It's just fun. It's something fun we can do. And Halloween's such a fun holiday. How can you not have a festive mug that that is supposed to terrify you, like my Scream mug?
I do the pagan holidays. I definitely think having an excuse to decorate your house every 6 weeks is super good for your brain. Like, that's why everybody loves the holidays because it's themed. You get to decorate your house like 3 different times, one right after the other, and,
Yeah.
like, it's so joyful, so just do that all year round.
You won't get bored.
With one caveat, you said that you celebrate the pagan holidays. With a little effort, you can make all of them pagan. So Easter comes around, instead to celebrate the rising of Adonis. That's a viable option.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we got $5 from SJL. I think realizing I would never see the futures that science fiction showed me made deconstructing fairly easy for me. Science fiction it is the most mind-numbing and mind-opening fiction I think we got.
I couldn't agree more. Chip, great to see you tonight, friend. Thank you for the $9.99. Says, wow, the compassion and understanding from Justin in this discussion with Tabitha almost had me in tears. Bravo. Rock hard for Doug and simply went for sharing. Chip, I appreciate that. At the beginning of the call, I was like, oh, not a flurf. Like, she going to get cooked. But there was a moment I realized that she was a nice individual. And I was like, no. I can't cook this person. They're legitimately on the journey being honest. I can't do that to them. So, but yeah, which good reminder, friends. Sometimes the right recipe isn't cooking. Sometimes the right recipe is to let it simmer. Is mine?
19...
I read this or you read
no,
this?
this was mine. Yeah. I got this one. So 1999 from Zenjana. Hey, Justin. Still trying to follow you from stream to stream. Algorithm and your channels keep me informed. Rock hard for Doug.
Thank you so much, Zen. It's great to hear from you. And what resilience you have following me from channel to channel. I love and appreciate you, friend. I really do. And 10 from the Atheist Mechanic, another friend that is on all of our channels, says, we all know the one true God is actually Godzilla. Second in command is the monad. Listen, I don't disagree. I have a polytheistic system with Doug. Doug is in harmony with Spanky, Godzilla, the monad, even Russell's teapot.
There is a complexity here, though. Which Godzilla? Because we can't say all Godzillas, because the 1998 American Godzilla does not belong in that pantheon.
No, bad.
All right, we got $5 from Zeroth Moonpaw. If Doug fought the monad, would the flying spaghetti monster have to stop them? Or would the universe farting pixies? Also, can I has a cookie?
Well, Doug is a lover, not a fighter. So he'd be hanging out with Lisa, the rainbow giraffe, and the life-granting unicorn, just chilling. He's not out here fighting anyone. He's over here getting stoned. Don't worry. He's chill. And from Science Lover, thank you for the 349 THB, says retrocausality is the theory most Christians use to get to heaven by sinning repeatedly and asking for forgiveness later. I think you nailed it, actually.
Booyah, booyah.
Big W, Science Lover.
An additional $10 from the Atheist Mechanic. Okay, Skeletor voice. I don't know if I can do this, but I will try. Remember, threatening an eternity of torture for a finite crime is no moral, and is more telling of a moral thug. Until we meet again! In all seriousness, love the show. Curse you, He-Man!
Thank you, friend. And Becky, thank you for the $5 super chat, says, my homeschool education was from a Mennonite curriculum, so they went in depth about the horrors of the Inquisition. Actually, this is the one good thing you'll get from a Mennonite education, because Mennonites come from the Anabaptists, obviously. And believe it or not, the Anabaptist, we'll call it the History Museum, is actually in my state, Ohio. You can go and see the history of Anabaptism. But that being said, the horrors that were inflicted upon the Mennonites and the early Anabaptists are they turn the stomach over. Like there were people that baptized adults, and as punishment, they round up the entire family and drown them in the river. Men, women, and children bound up hands and feet, drowned in the river, and then they're mocked by saying we gave them a third baptism.
I think this one's
Falcon Storm. Yeah, I think I'm very Falcon Storm. Thank you for the super chat. It says Aaron dropped Yoshi like he was playing Super Mario. Indeed.
Yes,
tired of that damn tongue.
I am unkind to dinosaurs. Also, fun fact, because of the languages I've been trying to learn is Chinese, and the Chinese word for game is Yoshi. So every time I'm playing Super Mario and I'm riding Yoshi, I am riding the game, even though, of course, obviously, Yoshi is a character in a Japanese created game, but nonetheless, the pun works. I'm running with it. You can't stop me. I'll stick a red Yoshi on you if you try to. All right, how about $15 from Red Shrek. Justin, we know King Ahab's chariot forces were held in high regard by the Assyrian Empire. Do you know of Israelite chariot forces were incorporated into the Assyrian army?
So, kind of yes and no, and you can say by default that this is the case. So, for example, we read in the Hebrew Bible that certain kings, for example, famously King Ahaz, had an alliance with the Assyrians, and quite a few Israelite kings did. The reality of it is that if you were in an alliance with a superpower like Assyria, you were part of a suzerain vassal treaty, and part of a suzerain vassal treaty requires you to give your own military force to them when they go out to battle. So if you read like the treaties of Asarhaddon with Tyre or any of the other Assyrian vassal treaties, what you'll find is there's usually a clause in there that demands complete loyalty, and then on top of it, when we go to war, you go to war with us. And typically what they would do is they would take your most prized war asset and incorporate that into their army, right? And so, yes, it's not just implied in extra biblical text. It's just true that in the treaties that we had with Assyria, it's kind of assumed, based on how we know treaties worked, that some of the Israelite men would have had to fight on the side of the Assyrians at some point, at least until the Assyrians decided they were going to come in and destroy the Israelites because they threw off the yoke, as it was said, of the Assyrians. Once you rebel against the yoke of the Assyrians, they don't care about your chariots anymore. They're going to come in and completely annihilate you, which is what they did. They came in, they destroyed everybody, and they even nearly destroyed Judea. Hannah Hodgkins, great to see you tonight. Thank you for the super chat, friend. Says, love the line all the time. Godzilla bless and Doug bless everyone. Stay rock hard. Couldn't agree more, Hannah.
And we got $5 from RD Killa. There is no truth less beautiful than a lie.
I agree. And Atheist Mechanic again, good to see everybody. Thank you for the additional super chat. Says, just meaning this as a funny, but I cannot afford enough diagrams to stay rock hard for Doug. I'm a piss poor Dougite. May the monad be more forgiving, Godzilla as well. Well, Atheist Mechanic, the good news for you is you just have to read.
Oh no.
Doug,
Aaron, you still there?
Pay for them.
Oh, there he's back. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Justin, you froze there for about 5 seconds.
Oh, we lost connection for a second. Oh, sorry. Did you guys hear the super? Atheist Mechanic, it's okay. if you can't afford all the diagrams, it's difficult as a mechanic to get all of the diagrams. That's why you have to have a friend at the dealership that will give them for you, so you don't have to pay for all of them. But I think they still only charge like $1 or $2 per diagram. I don't know. But listen, Doug loves you, whether you love Doug or not. Don't worry. You can always be rock hard for Doug. If you're having trouble with that, there's a pill.
However, Godzilla does not forgive or forget. So you're still in trouble there.
Zurith Moonpaw says, poof, you're both now furries. What is your fursona? All animals allowed, no need for fur. Aaron, what's your fursona?
So weirdly enough, I already got this question. I can't remember from Zurith or elsewhere, but I was on with Erica the last time I was on SkepTalk, and I answered with Hedgehog because I was into Sonic the Hedgehog when I was younger. I dressed up for him for Halloween, and I know of all the Sonic sex lore out there, so I know what that is putting me into. I know the world it is going in there. So yes, I guess I am Hedgehog, and now I have to deal with the curse of being Mpreg. I understand my fate.
Am I thinking of the wrong animal? Hold on. Don't they have 2 members?
I think you're thinking of the echidna that has a 4-headed. They have a 4-headed penis.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, not hedgehog. Yes. Okay. And, that makes sense. Yeah. I was like,
and if it still can. Well, I see why you're confused, because one of Sonic's friends, other characters, is Knuckles the echidna. So there's an echidna in the Sonic world. As far as I know, they do not focus on his ability to reproduce in the game franchise, but I haven't checked all the comics. There's probably some deep lore that someone has really read up on. But now it's your turn to answer the question about your fursona.
I don't. This is a tough one. I've never had to think about if I have a fursona, but If I had a fursona, I just got to be a dog. It's got to be a dog. I can't sit down. I've got to be doing something at all times. I'm not like a cat. I don't have that chill where I can just sleep for 18 hours out of the 24 hours. I'm more like Chance from Homeward Bound, where like I have to find something to get into, even if it's trouble. It's one of those things. Atheist Mechanic, thank you for the super chat, says that was supposed to say Viagra, not diagram. That makes a lot more sense, and that's why you're not rock hard. I told you there's a pill for that, my friend. In fact, support a local company. They make that in Kalamazoo, Michigan. You're supporting the economy of the United States of America when you take Viagra.
Mm-hmm. I have family in Kalamazoo. You're helping out me and my family if you do this, apparently. $20 from Red Trek. What do you think about the claim in 2 Kings that claimed Yahweh defeated Judah, delivered Judah out of the hands of the Assyrians? We know in reality, Assyria wrecked Judah. I have seen the relief of the siege of Lachish.
Yeah, it's rough. Okay, so this is a very good point. And the most stark difference you'll find is, in fact, during the lifetime of Hezekiah. The way they paint the Assyrian conflict under Hezekiah is like they came in, they defended themselves. Hezekiah, God was pleased with Hezekiah. He granted them victory. It says that, the angel of the Lord came in and murdered all these Assyrian troops. And it's funny because, like, if you read the account from the Assyrians, it's the exact opposite. We breached the wall, and then the radiance of the king was so significant that the troops of the enemy fell backwards, and Hezekiah was caged up like a bird. There was one occasion where it says that he had to run away on his chariot, and he was so scared that he defecated in his chariot. The reality is that these stories are told with a particular viewpoint in mind, and that viewpoint is to make your king look like a badass. There's actually wars that were fought between the Hittites and the Egyptians. When you read the two different accounts, it's hard to tell who the hell won, because you're like, it seems like both sides are claiming victory. And so, yeah, the Bible for sure seems during this period seems to, like, any time that the Assyrians left without utterly annihilating everybody, it was an act of God. And you could see why people would feel this way, because the Assyrians were vicious. Like, if you look at the inscriptions at the palace of Ashurbanipal, they're flaying people alive. Like, these are vicious human beings. And any time that they left and people didn't get carried away in chains, it certainly would give you a big sigh of relief. And the good thing about the Assyrians is, unlike the Babylonians, they didn't come back every year and try to destroy you. They had so many territories under their control that they might come in, siege your town, end up taking tribute and leaving with an agreement that you'll pay more tribute, and then they'll screw off for the next 10 years because they've got to worry about this other thing over here. So you get this period of peace or rest between the incursions that feels like God is saving you in that moment. That's why you'll see, like, even in Isaiah chapter 9, there is a period of respite between the Assyrian invasions. There's a lot there, but the longer story is, yes, Red Shrek, you're 100% right. The Bible is painting these war stories in a light that makes it feel like Yahweh's a badass when we know he got his ass kicked.
And we also know Hezekiah paid up. That is not what you do if God came in and took out the army. It's like, if that's the case, then why does it also say in 2 Kings that he paid out like hundreds of talents of silver and gold, and exactly as the king demanded? And as he says in the release, that King Sennacherib says, yep, and I got all the money. So it's like, yeah, both sides agree. Who paid whom? Whom's the Don in this racket? It's pretty darn clear. Whoopsie doodle.
Yeah.
All right. Ooh, $5 from Godwin. You bounced Yoshi? How dare you? Wah, wah.
Red Shrek, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. It says, archaeologists discovered an Assyrian siege engine around Lachish that bolsters the Assyrian claims. Oh yeah, listen, the war at Lachish, this is not a war that I think historians and scholars are divided on. I think we pretty much know what happened at Lachish. The biblical account is just not accurate. And even the way, if you look at like the assistance by the Egyptians and how the Egyptians were involved in some of these wars between Assyria and Israel, doesn't even paint that in a correct light.
We've got one that just came in. I was about to be like, now we're done, but no, we're not.
All right. So, $20 generous dollars again from Red Shrek. Do you think ancient Israel interacted with Elam?
I mean, that seems to be the case. Elam wasn't far off. We have data that suggests that they were probably not daily interacting with the Elamites. So the Elamites are going to be all the way east past Syria. So think of like closer to Babylon, further away from Nineveh. The Nineveh is like the northwest tip of the Mesopotamian Empire. Babylon is closer to like the southeast of the Fertile Crescent. So Elam's further over than some of their neighbors. But did they have dealings with the Elamites? Certainly it would seem to be the case that they share so much language and grammar and even names. You'll find in the Elamite text, you'll find names that appear to be Palestinian or Levantine, and in the names of Levantine archaeology, you'll find names that end up like being more Elamite in nature. So to the extent of their dealings, I can't say that a great deal. That wasn't really my area of study. All we can say is, from what we know about the ancient world, it would seem out of place if they didn't have dealings with them. I mean, they had dealings with people all the way down in Egypt from the north. They were taking ships all the way from Lebanon through the Mediterranean down and back to Egypt. So we know they were doing trade a great deal, and the Israelites were doing trade with the Phoenicians and people up in Tyre. And at some point, it seems like they even had some dealings up in Anatolia. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if there were some dealings with Elamites.
I do have to admit, though, when I first read that question, my brain went in the wrong direction. So when I see Elam, I don't first think of the Bible. I think of Elam Garak from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Right.
My answer would have been, no, there was no relationship because Garak doesn't exist for like several thousand years after the fall of ancient Israel. So, yeah, wrong star system, things like that. But again, my brain was in the wrong universe.
Sure. This is my super chat from Darren McAuliffe says, I know there's a third creation story somewhere where Yahweh fights Leviathan, somewhere in Psalms, I think. Where is it? Also, are there any mentions of Asherah left in there as a god, not just as a pole? Okay, so there's two questions. First, yes, I think the psalm you're looking for is 74, if I remember correctly. I can tell you quickly if that was the one, Psalm 74. Let's see.
The battle between God and Leviathan or Rahab is actually also kind of sprinkled throughout the Old Testament. So bits of it here in Isaiah, bits of it elsewhere in the Psalms and Job. It's well known throughout there, and the story of Rahab got cut up just like the creature itself did, apparently.
Yes. Yeah. Psalm 74:14 says, you crushed the heads, plural, of Leviathan, and you gave him as food for the creatures in the wilderness. And you're right, this is what we refer to as the third creation story. It's riffing on this idea that there is a sea creature. The Leviathan or Lotan in Ugaritic mythology was like a sidekick of Yam, the deity of the sea. It reads similarly in Babylonian texts. And as part of heading to the top of the pantheon, you have to defeat this chaos monster. And so, obviously, when the Bible co-opted, the Canaanite culture, you have to paint Yahweh somewhere as defeating the Leviathan, because how else could he rise to the top of the pantheon if he didn't beat Leviathan? The problem is the Canaanites probably already knew of competing stories from the Baal cycle about Leviathan, so they had to kind of co-opt some of that literature. The second question about Asherah is yes. Almost all of the mentions of Asherah in the Old Testament mention her as a deity. When it mentions her as a sacred object, it's Asherim in the plural. So if you're looking through the Hebrew, if you've got some sort of Blue Letter Bible or something, you can look through the text. Try to find the places where Asherah is mentioned in the singular and not in the plural. That will get you to the goal.
Also, fun bit that the story of God versus the sea monster is not just in Canaanite. You can find it everywhere from Greek myth, where Zeus is fighting Typhon, all the way to Japan with the Yamato no Orochi. And it seems to actually be derived from the same Canaanite origins. It traveled all the way from there to Japan. So if it can travel all the way from Syria to Tokyo, you know it can travel from Syria to Jerusalem.
Right.
All right, and we got 15 more generous dollars from Red Trek. Justin, do you believe there was a unified monarchy from the Bronze Age? Personally, I'm not convinced. Israel Finkelstein's work has been had a huge effect on how I see things.
Yeah, certainly. So Israel Finkelstein and the Bible Unearthed, just a classic resource that really helps on this topic. Okay, so I'm torn on whether or not there was a true united monarchy, because there's lots of instances in the historical past where people have claimed to have these big monarchies, and it turns out it was more messy than people realized. But if you're the king of something that's large and most of it's united, then you can claim that you're the king of united monarchy, even though there's a lot of factions here, a lot of factions there that are in the middle of rebellion. But in the way that we think of a united monarchy, do I think there was a Bronze Age or early Iron Age united monarchy the way the Bible paints it? Probably not. And there are a lot of passages in the Bible, you'll find them if you read through it slowly, where the Israelites in the north and the Judeans in the south are treated as separate tribes, even during the period of the monarchy. It's weird that even during Saul's lifetime, and even during David's lifetime, you'll find texts where they're still treating the north and the south like they're separate, like they have separate leaders in the north and the south. And then even during the reign of Solomon, you'll find instances where people are speaking of leaders that are clearly leaders of the northern tribes and leaders of the southern tribes, like there's still some kind of division, like they weren't entirely united, which makes sense because theoretically the united monarchy barely lasted a generation and a half. Like it was hanging by a thread to begin with. So was there a real united monarchy? I'm not inclined to believe that there was a good one. I think the reason why the united monarchy is so heavy in the Bible, and I think that it's being idolized from the past, kind of like the way Americans idolize the early period of the United States, right? And so during the Assyrian conquest, all the northerners that didn't get carried away, that didn't leave to the north, that didn't go somewhere else, a lot of them went south into Judea. The population of Judea, specifically in Jerusalem, doubled during the Assyrian invasion, which means a lot of people from the north just came south into Judea for safety. Some of them even went down to Egypt. And the reality is you had a big mixing of northern Israelites, probably really Canaanites, and Judeans that had to become one people group at some point. And that's when I think the lore really started to get mixed. That's when the priests from the north that had access to the literature for their people in the north combined that literature with a lot of the people in Judea, attempting to make one cohesive backstory for the people groups so that they can operate like they're one nation now that we've got all these people. Are there some family ties there? Probably. Just like right now, if you ask the average Russian, they believe that the Ukrainians are genetically and historically Russians, right? Because there was some link there at some point in time. The reality is the northern Israelites and the Judeans were a mixed people at some level, which means it felt roughly normal for them to combine in Judea after the conquest by the Assyrians. And if you talk to people like Richard Elliott Freeman, he makes a really good case for the documentary hypothesis really coming into shape beginning in this time period. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer. Atheist Mechanic, thank you for the $10 super chat. Says, the nerd is strong within us all. Sorry, I lost track. Much love to you guys and everyone on the line. Thank you, Atheist Mechanic. And I'm sorry if I nerd out on some of these questions. I think they're fun. I know some people are glazing over, most likely.
And that is all. All right.
Well, Aaron, buddy, it was good to be on screen with you.
An absolute pleasure. I think we had an awesome time, and hopefully the viewers felt the same way. So much so, they'll be checking out all the other excellent shows here on the line, and of course, SkepTalk next week as well. Final thoughts?
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Don't forget Patreon, everybody. Patreon.com/calltheline. Get your name in the credits.
The patrons make this show happen. The super chats make this happen. You guys make this happen. We just talk to people for a couple hours.
Yeah. As Darth Dawkins would say, we're just talking head atheists.